Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun! Today we are going to play more Higurashi no Naku Koro ni as it gets wild and crazy. The paranoia is really setting in with, Did I really forget the main character's name already? Yeah, I always do. But yeah, I am here with a special guest. My mom is here.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Yep, she's come to visit for the weekend and figured since I'd be streaming a spooky story, and she likes spooky stories. Oh, God. Chill out, God. You are alive? You talking to me? Of course I'm alive. What does that even mean? Yeah, so to recap what we've been doing in the game so far, God, what the fuck is his name? We've just moved into Hinamizawa, a happy-go-lucky rural village that we find out is a lot darker than it seems because there was an incident with a dam project in the past where they were going to dam up around the city, and it would have caused the city to be flooded, and the people of the town didn't want to move. So they protested, and there was some violence in there. Keiichi, duh, thank you. And, yeah, there was a lot of violence. One dude was presumably dismembered, and ever since that murder, every day on the night of the, the festival. What was the fuck? It's the Cotton Drifting Festival. I keep remembering the Japanese name. It's not the Hinamizawa Festival. It's the, I'll remember it as it comes up again. But yeah, don't swear, your mom will hear. Are the cicadas real? No, that's in the game. That's totally part of the game. We have a damn problem on our hands. Yeah, and on the night of the festival, for like the past 5 years or something, someone has died and someone has gone missing. And so, of course, we found out that the photographer guy, Tomitake, was recently found just last night having clawed at his neck to death. So he did. He did, and the detective just told us, so we're trying to look into whether this was an actual foul play or whether or not the curse of Oyashiro-sama is real. Feels like when Braddock's father left the colonists back in. I don't know what... Oh, Lost Planet 3? I have not played that before. Do you want the Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Just pay the resale? Fuck that. No scalpers, no. There's also a chance that Mion was involved. Right, because Mion, the tomboy chick that talks kind of like an old man, her family's like one of the big heads in Hinamizawa, and the detective said, don't tell anyone else about this. Because we suspect that maybe Mion's family had something to do with it, because they're bigwigs in the whole town. The best goddamn fried chicken I've ever had. You talk about from that statue we recovered? Nonsense. Impossible. Not Mion, Rena, Satoko, or Rika-chan. It was a group that attacked... Tomitake-san? Who could the perpetrators be? Could it be they were hiding here, somewhere in Hinamizawa? I didn't know. All I could say for certain was that I knew that Mion couldn't be the perpetrator. Huh? I was startled to hear Rena's voice. Oh, they're playing that Clue game again. Here's a Higurashi fighting game on PSP. That's funny. Rena clutched her head while flailing about. Looks like you're just self-destructing over here, wow. Oh yeah, he got called out in the middle of the game to go talk to the detective. Because they're during their lunch break.
こっちも白熱してたしね。もういい時間だから次で最後のゲームにしよう。
俺の今の持ち点って確か0点だろ。ビリ確定じゃないのかよ。
大丈夫だよケイチ君。レナマイナス1点。
The heck? Her score is lower than mine and I wasn't even playing.
罰ゲームはレナが1人でかケイちゃんと2人でかを決める最終戦。
冗談じゃねえぞ。罰ゲームはレナ一人でやってくれ。
ケイチ君と2人で勝とうって約束したのにずっと待ってたんだよ。
Oh yeah.
そりゃ俺が
He
悪い。
planned to kind of cheat with her to try and win the game because they were both in a disadvantage. It's not a matter of whether you can afford a scalped price, it's about supporting the rat bastards who do the scalping. I followed my initial plan of showing Rena my cards, but it didn't say who was the criminal and just waited for her to call.
分かったよ。犯人は私。凶器は毒物で犯行現場はどうかなどうかな。おお、レナ。
That one picture of Archwade is probably the goriest thing in the whole game, though.
また当てずっぽいじゃないの。
The reason it probably got the Sero Z. Was it Sero Z? Is that the one that's the highest rating for Japan? What is your prediction on the white ride guy from Xenoblade 3? I don't look at a lot of the trailers intentionally after I know I'm gonna love it. So I'm not sure. I don't try to like make speculation on the trailer, I just want to see the game as it comes out. Like when it comes out.
レナの正解ですよ。じゃあこれでケイチさんも罰ゲーム決定ですわね。やったー。ケイチ君一緒に頑張ろうね。
ああ、一緒に頑張ろうな。
It's my fault, so I have no choice.
ではゲームセット。トップは私、園崎美音。ビリは前原圭一と竜宮レナ。
It's not a scam if you enjoy the product, dude. You're so frictional. Everyone applauded the and the game ended. The problem now is the penalty.
じゃあ使いっ走りの系のを買ってくるものはトップの私が決めようかね。
The gopher penalty?
何を買いに行かされるんだろう。
Oh right, the punishment is just you have to go out and buy whatever the hell we ask you to go buy
薬
for
局は
us.
禁じ手にしような。図星太郎。
は？薬屋なんかに用ないよ。おじさんが買ってほしいものはね、このメモに書いてあるから。はあ、いっぱい書いてあるよ。
A lot? Damn it. What is she making us buy? You like Chun-Li in the new Street Fighter? She looks cool, I suppose. She looks pretty consistent to what we've had before.
みりんに油揚げ。
The game looks alright. I kind of like the idea of them running around in a hub world of the city. That's kind of a cool way to expand the formula instead of just being a fighting game. Obviously, it's still a fighting game, but yeah. I like Cammy's new outfit too.
勝つ気満々でしたです。快速第7条。罰ゲームの内容に逆らわない。はい、お金。シャンプーはうち果物物語だからね。よろしく。
Let's see, you read Junji Ito. Yeah, you mentioned that, but I don't think I can read manga on a live stream without copyright issues. I think that's a problem. I promised myself that if I won next time, I'd make her go buy hemorrhoid cream. Ugh. She's just making you buy shampoo, dude. I haven't been a huge fan of like the overall art style of Street Fighter ever since 4. They've started to make the characters kind of look like gorilla-esque. I'll save here. And we're not going to read any of the tips because the game's already long enough on its own. We can read those tips later. There was another game they showed off during the State of Play that looked really cool. I forgot what it's called. Eternights, I think it was. It looks kind of Persona-y or whatever. That looks like fun. I'll probably get my hands on that game. Hello, welcome. What's up? Just playing more. Sleepy.
ケイチくんでっかいお旅
I'm usually awake once it's time to eat, but it doesn't look like I can do it today.
ゆうべ遅くまでテレビ見てたら眠くて眠くて。
How am I doing in Summer 4? You mean the rerun? I'm just doing it to get money. I just finished it, like, the other night, but I'm still using the fever tickets to get as much dough as I can. Even with, like, constantly farming all of your fever tickets on the millionaire nodes, you can still only, like, upgrade maybe, like, 1 or 2 skills to, like, 10, because it just costs so much to upgrade anything in that game. Ken's design is interesting. He's no longer in a gi. He hasn't been for like the last 2 games. Final Fantasy XVI just doesn't look interesting to me. The graphics are obviously amazing. The animation, the combat, it all looks kind of cool, but nothing pops. It's all like your generic, like watered down, like Game of Thrones-y kind of like dark fantasy, but there's like no charm to it. I guess that's what I'm looking for. I have my doubts for Street Fighter 6, to be honest. We have to see more about it. I'm not a huge Street Fighter fan anymore. I like the older stuff, like the anime and whatnot. But yeah, we'll have to see.
男の子なら当然です。恥ずかしくないですよ。
Rika not patting my head only made me feel worse.
ちょっとこの昼休みは爆睡させてくれ。いや本当マジで。
あら、私が黙って見過ごすとお思いで。
邪魔したら怒る。すごい怒る。はあはあ。
This was just dreadful. Just so sleepy. I slumped my head onto the desk and drifted off into an afternoon nap. It seemed that Satoko had responded, but I pretended not to hear.
さとこちゃんやめなよ。ケイチくん寝ちゃった。寝顔かい。
後でお持ち帰りしていいからそっとしときな。
向こうへ移動しましょうです。ケイチにうるさいと悪いですよ。
Well, Xenogears Perfect Works is a book. So you just mean you want a Xenogears remake, period. Rika-chan is a really good girl.
先生が来ても起こさないであげましょうです。
Oh, I take that back. The excuse that I didn't sleep much last night was because I was watching, that because I was watching TV was a lie. I was in bed at the usual time, but because of the conversation with Oishi-san, the detective, that afternoon I didn't get much sleep. Just spending the day like this, it's almost as if the incident with Tomitake-san didn't happen at all. It made me think, was Oishi-san just trying to deceive me? But it was probably the truth. One thing was certain, I couldn't speak to anyone about it. Oh, well, you don't have to buy the letter of challenge to get past the fight where she's invincible. You're supposed to lose that fight or survive X number of turns or whatever it was, but you still then would have to buy from the event shop the letter of challenge in order to proceed with the story missions. Yeah, you just go into the event shop and scroll over to the far right tab, and one of the things you can buy are the event challenges. Harem goes yandere time? Maybe. Resident Evil 4 remake looks absolutely amazing. Maybe. I actually didn't look at that one. I just think it's kind of funny because they put all that work into Resident Evil 4 VR just to remake it, like, right after that. Like, within the same, like, couple of months, it feels like. If I know I wasn't going to be of any help, I probably wouldn't have listened in the first place. It ended up with me, again, regretting learning something I didn't need to know. If I never learned about it, I would, without a doubt, be goofing off with the rest of them right now. I couldn't help but resent Oishi-san for this.
それっていつから？
もう次の日にはいなかったって。
Oh, they're
渡
talking
辺
about
氏
it.
の番に失踪したらしいよ。
Mion whispered to keep others from listening, but I could hear it clearly. On the other hand, Rena's voice was even harder to pick up, but I could still tell that she was quite upset. It couldn't be. Are they talking about Tomitake-san?
さん、けなの？
わかんない。私の知る限りではね。
Well, there's a lot of fights in Fate Grand Order where if you clearly can't defeat the enemy, they want you to just, like, keep attacking until, like, a certain number of turns pass, and then it clears the mission for you. That's pretty normal. I would have to feign ignorance about this topic because I needed to keep it a secret. Rather than waking up and being forced to lie to join the conversation, it was much easier to just sit here and pretend I was sleeping to listen in on their discussion. Wait, why did I have to pretend to be asleep while eavesdropping on my friends' conversation? The guilt stung.
ね、で、他にもいるんでしょ？か。
彼女がたたりにあったのか、鬼隠しにあったのかはわかんないけどね。
Onikakushi? Onikakushi? To be hidden away by a demon? Yeah, they can't tell if they were spirited away like the person who vanished versus the one that was killed. What a mysterious phrase. I did, however, get the feeling it meant nothing good.
いや、何せよ。もう一人いるんだよね。だよね。
お社様なら、ね。
You don't make any sense, God Howard.
でも
You do not make any sense.
今年はってな。
バッチャと村長さんが話してたんだ
If
け
you
ど
like
さ
something, you buy it. And if someone's trying to scam you with it, then fuck them. Well, I think they should just keep it with Xenogears. I don't think they should call it Perfect Works at that point.
今年は事前に警察と話がつけてあるらしいんだよ。何が起こっても騒ぎにしないで穏便に片付けるって。
じゃあ、レナたちが知らないだけで、どこかで誰かが、かもしれないってこと？
God Howard, is Thick Dough 69 your alternate account? Because you're just posting the exact same thing in 3 accounts. If you don't cut that out, I might ban you.
かもね。
次は
That's weird. Why are you doing that?
レナかな。
安心しなよ。レナはちゃんと帰ってきたよ。
でも、ダメだったんでしょ？
昔の話だよ。もうやめよう、この話。
Amidst the uncomfortable mood, both of them went silent. The entirety of the conversation was still a bit unclear, but a few parts caught my attention. First of all, the term Onikakushi. To be demoned away. By the context it was used in, I would guess it's similar to being spirited away. I suspected that it meant because Tomitake-san and that woman, it really bugged me that I don't know her name, vanished after the Wataganashi. The next thing that stuck out was when Rena said, "There's another one, right?" Mion also said, "If it's Oyashiro-sama's, yeah, responding to something. If it's Oyashiro-sama's curse, then there had to be 2 victims. Is that what she meant?" Come to think of it, I remember Mion saying at the beginning that they didn't know if it was from the curse or if it was a case of Onikakushi. It seems that the curse and being demoned away are different things, and they were phenomena that were being paired together. I recalled Tomitake-san's terrible end. That wasn't something as elegant as disappearing. That horrendous end would be described as cursed. Then the woman with him, It means she vanished because she was demoned away? What I do know is that there's normally an even number of victims of the curse proper. And the last point that bothered me was Rena. Rena was frightened. For what reason, I didn't know. However, she knew that something had made her a potential target for Yashiro-sama's curse. Well, I don't want weird people spamming my shit, so don't do that. If I recall correctly, Oyashiro-sama should be the guardian deity of Hinamizawa. Isn't a guardian deity supposed to defend the citizens and drive out invaders? If I recall correctly, yesterday Oishi-san said that originally the targets were enemies of the village, but recently there was no longer any distinction between them or regular outsiders. But if that were the case, then I would think that I'd be the more likely target, having moved here more recently than Rena. From her composure, I would infer that she was grimly certain that she would be next. I should probably relay what I just heard to Oishi-san. Informing the police of what I had heard by eavesdropping on my friends while pretending to be asleep. It made me feel terrible. It raised a few questions and left me with a bad taste in my mouth. Would it be better not to seek the answers to those questions? As I continued to learn more and more, I felt like I had fallen past the point of no return. I would definitely regret this one day. It's sad CL and Tsukihime did not rise into the waifu tier list. You know, those tier lists so confuse me. You guys vote in such unpredictable ways. But, you know, it is what it is. When, at the end of each, like, set of tiers, I'll probably put on another one of those larger polls that list all the waifu that were kicked out because they lost. And maybe somebody, you can all vote to see if you want to bring any of them back. The teacher approaches. Oh, wait, she's already said that. In the distance, I could hear the ring of the handbell signaling the start of afternoon classes. I couldn't sleep at all. I hastily opened my eyes and raised my head up. It was in that moment when I leaned against the back of my seat. There was a thumbtack stuck on the back of my chair with tape. Circumstantial evidence was enough. Guilty without trial? Capital punishment! I furiously jumped up from my seat and tripped as if my feet were tangled up. My shoelaces had been tied together. No, they're not bots. You're drinking hot Dr. Pepper? What? You mean like it was sitting in your car for a while or something? The teacher came in right as I was about to pull off my shoes and tackle Satoko. Howard, no, you sent a bunch of idiots to spend my chat, so no, I'm gonna knock them out. Not caring one bit, I made her eat a flick to the forehead. That's a weird way of saying that. You stabbed him in the back with a thumbtack. That's pretty fucked up. You whiny brat. I saw Satoko stick out her tongue at me. That little brat!
へいへい謝りますよ。さとこさんごめんなさい。
It's only a matter of time before Dai does what exactly? Yes, the protag is having a horrible day. In any case, I apologized, even if it was in a completely insincere tone of voice. Damn her. I'll remember this!
ケイちゃんケイちゃん、その恨みは部活でね。着席着席。
I sat down after Mion told me to. She'd switched to class representative mode. Now you heat Dr. Pepper in the microwave for 2 minutes and put a lemon in it? Huh. Interesting. Well, I won't hate it until I've tried it, I guess. With the boring classes finished, school was finally over for the day. Oh, before I'm sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends? You know what? I actually did get an opportunity to do that, I guess. But I'm like, can't, like, a good game want to sponsor me? Like, one that actually has anything to do with my channel, like something cute and anime-ish? Now then, what should we do with our club for today? Like, I would do an ad for Genshin Impact, even if I'm not, like, addicted to the game. I want to be part of their team for ZZZ. That game looks awesome. I want in on it. Personally, I would like to play that deduction game one more time. I was hardly able to play it last time because of Oishi-san. Rihanna and I weren't able to test out our strategy.
そうだね。今日こそケイチ君と二人で大勝利だよね。
And of course, if FGO wanted to sponsor me, I'd be like, yes! Yes! But I don't think they do that with anybody. It's real good for allergies, huh?
同じゲームを続けて2日やった試しは
Normally, sugary drinks wouldn't help you for that kind of thing, but I don't play Genshin, but I would do an ad for them, I guess.
ミーにお願いしてみたらどうでしょうです。
Mion looked over her shoulder as we made eye contact. She slowly tapped her palm with her fist as her face suddenly lit up.
いっけね。今日おじさんの手伝いの日だ。
Did you hear what happened to Sherlock in Lost Belt 6.5? I may have heard that spoiler, I don't know the details, but try not to post that spoiler here in the chat.
悪いみんな、今日なし。
You can say it all you want in, like, my Discord sections.
おじさんの手伝い？柄にもなく高校なやつだな。
People were suspecting that for a while, though, admittedly. And I thought it was the thing that made the most sense, too.
ほんとすっかり忘れてた。じゃあごめんねみんな。今日はおじさんこれで帰るわ。
Mion left us with that and rushed off to the exit after snatching up her bag.
みーちゃんね、たまに街にあるおじさんのお店の手伝いに行くんだよ。
Well, I hate sinus trouble, so if that works, huh? Ah, I thought she wasn't the type to get caught up in such bothersome stuff.
バイト代が出ると言ってましたですわ。結構なお小遣いになるらしいですの。
I see. She was able to pay for that mountain of games with what she saved up from there.
しかしそれはアルバイトと言うんじゃないのか？校則で禁止されてないか？
家事手伝いは除くと書いてありますです。
You get paid for house chores. It doesn't count. I mean, that makes sense. Is that what she's calling it? So what now? Pass on the club today?
じゃあ今日はこれで解散かなかな。
別に部長不在でもいいだろう。やろうぜ、部活。
I opened the club locker and began searching for the deduction game from that ever-growing pile of games.
あったあった。昨日の推理ゲーム。
I would love to see you do a horror anime tier list. That could be fun. I think I would need more people wanting that than just the one person to justify making that video, but yeah. This city, I can't read all your messages because you keep retracting them. I didn't get to see it.
ようやくコツが分かってきたところで中断しちゃったからな。
At the very least, I wanted to repay Satoko for what she did during the afternoon break.
私は構いませんけど、 レナさんとリカはどういたします？ケイチくんがどうしてもって言うならちょっとだけいいかな。僕はみんなが揃っての方がいいなと思いますです。
And she says it like that.
部活がないなら僕はお買い物に行きたかったので。
Let's go! Yeah, if they did.
お醤油とかを買いに行きます。
Like, I've got to be giving them some amount of free publicity by, like, streaming the game and doing the lores to help people want to play it while skipping the cutscenes and doing all that stuff. Building a community around it and building up hype and all that.
すっかり忘れてましたわ。なら、レナも久しぶりに宝探しに行こうかな。
What's this now? Everyone was no longer in the mood for club activities. Would you ever do a short FGO tutorial for beginners? If people wanted that, then perhaps. Yeah. If I kept on trying to push the matter, it may make them realize I had a trick up my sleeve. Oh well, I'll give up this time.
このゲーム楽しみにしていたのにな。
You prefer the old marshmallow style for the VNs? This one seems very lacking, even if it has more defined art style. I don't know what you mean by the old marshmallow. I shuffled through the cards as if I was still caught up on it.
またの機会に叩きのめして差し上げましたよ。
犯人はサトコ、凶器はピストル。やはり貴様の仕業だったか。
なんですって？じゃあ。
What do I think the new Lost Belt servant is? I didn't know there was a new one. I knew we got, like, Charlemagne and... I forgot the other guy's name, and then we also got Kriemhilde or whatever, which is cool. Kriemhild, I think. Siegfried's lover. Satoko looked through the cards on the desk and stuck out 3 of them at me.
犯人はケイチ。凶器はロープで、犯行現場はラウンジですわ。
ロープなんかいらねえ。このまま絞め殺してやら。
いやー、ケイチさんの毛玉な。
Always kind of dreaming my little puppy made a whimper. Huh. Well, I guess it's good I got that out of my system.
ケイチさん、覚えてらっしゃい。
All I know is that I like this art style more than the other one that's included in this version of the game that they called the Remake Edition or whatever. That looked like crap.
いっぱいいっぱいいたぶられましたですね。かわいそうです。かいかい。
What would you consider to be a misconception, SSJ? Will I do a lore of her? Eventually? The problem is when it's all that stuff in JP unless I had access to a direct translation of it or something. And I have a lot of NA players that the lore would either be a spoiler or I would have to figure out what's going on with that character, 2 years before we actually get to see them in North America. Oh, you want me to read it on my own time? Uzumaki. I feel like I may have read that one already, but I don't remember based on the name. Everyone got ready to go back home. I also helped gather up the scattered cards. I suddenly paused. They were just the suspect cards, but I noticed something strange. Reina, Satoko, Rika, Keiichi, Mion. Satoshi? Satoshi? Not all the cards were made by us. Or at the very least, every card besides this one has the name of a club member. Does this mean that this Satoshi fellow is a member? Was there someone in this class named Satoshi? I couldn't find anyone named Satoshi on the class roster stuck up on the wall.
ケイチくん、早く片付けよう。
That becomes important later. Being rushed by Reina, I finished up quickly. Satoko and Rika-chan had already... headed merrily for their lockers, so we were the only ones left in the classroom. Right now, Reina had already gotten her bag and was ready to leave.
レナ、
Is this blind, or do you know what happens? I know everything that happens. I've watched all the animes and all that such, so I'm pretty familiar. This is my first time doing the novel, though. But yeah, I know where it's going. I like another. Another was,
転校で出て行っちゃった生徒って
I dare not to call it good, but certainly fascinating and interesting. I tried asking Reina in a bit of a roundabout way. Reina made me a troubled face, or made a troubled face, and then answered,
うんひなみ沢って田舎でしょ転校していっちゃう人も時々いるよ
じゃあこのサトシってやつも転校してったのか
ごめんよく知らないの
There was a bit of a pause, but the answer was pretty much immediate.
その意地悪で言ってるんじゃないのちょうど去年レナが転校してきてから入れ替わりだったかな
What post-apocalyptic anime or manga am I into? I don't, categorize them by post-apocalyptic, so right off the top of my head, I can't think of one, although I would know certain ones. Guinevere can't show up so she and Artoria can finish up their divorce. No! Although it would be nice to see an anime version of Guinevere just to know what she looks like. What was your favorite animated series or season OVA for Higurashi? I don't know, man. I guess the original. I kind of like it. I know it's not perfect because it rushes the story a lot. It changes, a couple of things, but it's cool.
ごめんね
I am not sure, sorry. Her answer was a lot like when she refused to tell me about the murder at the dam. I was saddened by her denial, and felt a little bit of anger. I'm their friend, aren't I? Friends don't keep secrets from their friends, do they? Though I do appreciate that they kept that unsettling curse thing from me. But if everyone is worried about it, I'd rather be worried with them. That's what it means to be friends, right? For a moment, I wondered what just what kind of face I was making just then, with these mixed feelings of sadness and annoyance.
ケイチ君怖い顔してるなんでだろうなんでだろう
It was probably exactly the kind of face Reina said it was. It appeared my grim expression had frightened her.
ごめん今日の部活楽しみにしてたからさ残念だっただけだよ
Who would I sheep Keiichi with? Probably Reina. They seem to have the most compatibility. I rustled Reina's hair. Mion's cool, but yeah, I mean, Mion really does like him too. So, I don't know, I guess for her sake, maybe? Dragging that awkward mood with us, we headed home. I just think it sucks because there's one eligible dude their age, so they're all falling for the only guy around they really have a choice for. You really hope Guinevere is not a saber face. Literally everyone in Pendragon is a saber face. Yeah, a lot of them are. Dragging that awkward mood with us, we headed home. I wonder why. Why have you begun getting this dumb feeling lately? I didn't know anything. I had nothing to worry about. I was just enjoying my everyday life. My long, outstretched shadow gave no answer to my naive inquiry.
ケイチ君疲れてるのかなかな
Like the misconception that FGO always had good rate-ups. I don't think it's ever had good rate-ups, honestly. Or beginner misconceptions that speedrunning the game is easy. It really isn't. No. That's the thing. I think it's actually a lot harder for newcomers because they have so much to catch up on and a lack of apples to do so. We were talking Junji Ito, you said you never read Uzumaki, so you probably have never read... I don't know, you cut your sentence off. Rena timidly questioned the reason behind my mood. I'm sure my expression made this situation even more unsettling.
そうか
うん今朝からケイチ君なんだか元気ないよ風邪かな
Physically, I was pretty sure I was in perfect health. It may not seem like it, but I've had perfect attendance since elementary school. Rena continued on since I didn't give her an answer.
きっと圭一くん引っ越しの疲れが今になってきたんだよ。前に住んでたところとは全然違うところだもん。いろいろ慣れたり覚えたり疲れて当然だよ。
そうなのかな。
絶対にそうだよ。
I wound up really liking Morgan's design. It took me a while. And I guess it makes sense since they're siblings, but yes, I agree. It would be nice if Guinevere could be designed slightly different. Even if she were still drawn by Takeuchi, just like, not literally make everything a saber face.
レナも最初そうだったから。わかるんだよ。だよ。
I wondered if Rena also experienced the slight bit of alienation last year that I was feeling right now. Thinking so, I felt that she was the only one who could understand how I felt.
レナがひなみ沢に転校してきた時の話が聞きたいな。どんなだった？
Feeling I had been drawn into the conversation, her face suddenly brightened.
圭一くんと同じだよ。人の名前も村の中も全然わかんなかった。みーちゃんとかが親切にしてくれたから全然寂しくなかったけど、やっぱり心細かったよ。
You know, we don't know the algorithm. We can't feel how often they give you the characters you want in the damn gacha. So, whether or not it's gotten better or not, I feel like would almost be like superstition or just like a gut feeling, but you wouldn't like know unless you worked there, I guess, and were the one altering the percentages. But yeah, I haven't had too much trouble lately. Rena told me all the details of when she moved here. All of her first acquaintances and surprises, worries and good
じゃ
times.
あレナもサトコにやられたのかよ。
椅子に座ろうとしたら画鋲が置いてあったの。
Satoko is vicious.
どっさり。
No, I've read a bit of Junji Ito, and I may have read Uzumaki. I just don't know which one Uzumaki is. If you gave me like a synopsis, I'd be like, ah, yeah, I remember that one. Or, nope, didn't read it.
そしたらそれを懐かしいな。
ミオンの部活にはいつ頃誘われたんだ？早速初日にか？
最初は部活なんてなかったんだよ。途中からできたの。放課後にみんなで残ってゲーム大会をやろうって言い出して。
そういえばミオン初代部長とか言ってたっけな。納得。
Is it getting an anime? I don't know.
内緒だけどね。みーちゃん
I know that there was
最初は読んだ
one,
んだよ。
the weird one with like the robo fish that got an ufotable movie or UFO table movie, and the Junji Ito collection. Those are the only two animated ones I'm aware of. You know, the summer events have a partial secret plot of the ever-lovable Fran building up a family? I guess so. We have not seen Guinevere's look in anything yet.
全然勝てなかった。
ミオンが？ちょっと想像つかないぞ。
自分で言い出した罰ゲーム、ほとんど自分でやってたんだよ。
Ilya and Satoko, yeah, they might get along. They're both bratty little demons. Except I understand Ilya more, even though I know what Satoko, you know, what her circumstances are as well. I can't believe Mion was like that. So she gradually transformed into a monster who used any means necessary to win during that time. Mion is at her best when she's fighting dirty.
みーちゃん以外ともちょっとずつお友達になれて。で、圭一くんが引っ越してきてからかな。ようやくここに馴染めたって自覚したのは。
I guess Rena had also been left in the dark about Oyashiro-sama when she just moved here. I guess when they finally told me about Oyashiro-sama, I'd be considered one of them.
俺はいつになったら仲間だと認めてもらえるんだろうな。
なんて言ったの？
あ、いや、ごめん。独り言。
圭一くん変なの。
Well, she's in Fate, but yeah, we don't know what she looks like. Rena was poking fun and having poking fun and laughing at me. And I couldn't help but laugh as well. But I suddenly stopped. Then after making up my mind, I spoke.
なあレナ、みんなは俺に嘘や隠し事なんかしてないよな。
してないよ、全然。
嘘だろ。
Rena suddenly stopped. Her expression was cold and intense.
どういう意味だろう、ケイチ君。
Her tone was still the same cheery and light-hearted one as before.
してるよな、俺に隠し事を。
After understanding what I meant, her expression grew even more intense. Seeing that face, I regretted saying something so rash. But she came back at me in a way I didn't expect.
じゃあさ、ケイチ君。ケイチ君こそ、レナたちに嘘や隠し事をしてないかな。
え？
Her tone didn't change, but it was the first time I'd ever seen this expression from Rena. With how her gaze pierced through me, I couldn't believe this was the same Rena.
してないかな。嘘や隠し事、してないかな。
You are. Secrets. She didn't actually say that part, but she looked as if she did. The incident with Tomitake-san and how I felt alienated from the group. Even without having to think about it, there were things I knew I felt guilty about, but I didn't tell anyone about what happened with Tomitake-san to be considerate. I was keeping it a secret just the same way they didn't tell me about Oyashiro-sama. Then aren't we even?
してないよ、嘘も隠し事も。
嘘だよ。
Her answer was instant and it shook me. Rena stared as if burrowing through me, watching me like a hawk.
どうして嘘だって。
ケイチ君、昨日の部活の時、先生に呼ばれて職員室に行ってたって言ったよね。レナは知ってるよ。ケイチ君は職員室になんか行かなかった。
I swallowed hard. It clearly wasn't a bluff. She knew what happened.
先生はお客さんが来たって言ったんだよね。でも昇降口ではお話ししてなかった。校門のところの車の中で話をしてたよね、知らないおじさんと。
Rena knew everything. She knew that I was called out by Oishi-san, and then I heard about the incident with Tomitake-san as well. Did she know all of it?
誰？あのおじさん。
知らない人だよ。
知らない人がなんでケイチ君に用があるの？
俺が知りたいよ。
じゃあ何の話をしていたの？
みんなとは関係のない話だよ。
It was a lie.
嘘だ！
Rena's scream echoed through the trees, sending frightened birds into the air. I couldn't exhale the deep breath I had just taken. No, it was like I wasn't allowed to exhale. It was here I first realized. This person in front of me, she wasn't Rena Ryugu. Then who was it that was standing before me now? Who had assumed Rena Ryugu's appearance? I held my breath for so long I could feel myself suffocating.
ね？
And then she made a facial expression that Rena normally might have made. It didn't matter that it was Rena's usual smile, it chilled me to the bone. She drew closer to me. I felt her breath against my face. It wasn't the least bit exciting. Whoever this was with Rena's face was going to chew my nose right off. I cowered as I imagined that. Then she smirked as if she was able to see right through me.
ケイチ君に内緒や隠し事があるように、レナたちにだってあるんだよ。
It was Rena's usual smile, but her eyes were still like that of a hawk's. Bringing her face close enough to mine to almost bump into my nose, she kindly persuaded me. I couldn't nod or shake my head. This person standing in front of me, this person who looked like Rena, frightened me to my core. I was terrified knowing that she could hear the sound of me swallowing nervously. After what felt like an eternity, after a long, empty silence, she finally spoke.
行こう。
Gyo is the one about the fish, and yeah, the spiral. Yeah, no, I've read the spiral one.
だいぶ涼しくなってきたよ。
It was Rena again. I don't know if making an anime adaptation of that would have been any good. Didn't it get a live-action adaptation or something? Smiling at me once more, she started walking as if nothing at all had happened. When I was released from her gaze, my legs gave out from under me and I slumped onto the ground. I wasn't able to lift a finger until Rena was out of my sight.
あれは誰だったんだよ。
I felt cold. My body was drenched in sweat. I was finally able to form a coherent thought and ask myself once again, who was that person? Who looked like Rena Ryugu? She did have a point, though. We were keeping certain things from her, too. I was out of it and couldn't bring myself to do anything until dinner except stare blankly into space. Was I terrified from Rena going off on me? No, that's not right. That was someone else who only looked like Rena. Then who could it have been? It was a dreadful feeling, knowing that that was someone else, not Rena. So tomorrow I shouldn't have a problem talking to Rena like I usually do. That thought was strangely comforting. What did I think about Uzumaki? I don't find it that scary, I just thought it was weird. I concluded that I should just calm down and clear my head. I'm not as horrified by, his works as a lot of people are. They're fascinating, they're well drawn. Do you know any news about Type Moon like Hollow Ataraxia or Strange Fake being animated? No, none at this point. Neither of those are the case. Those thoughts continued swirling around my mind. Finally, I returned to my senses as I heard my mother calling me out from the bottom of the stairs.
ケイチ、本屋さんから電話よ。
Bookstore? Can't think of why they'd be calling me. I went downstairs and picked up the receiver anyway.
夜分遅くに申し訳ありません。
Hello.
私、沖宮書房の大石と申します。
大石さん？大石さんじゃないですか。
ごめんなさい。ご両親が出られたので、本屋さんということにしておきました。警察ですって名乗ると、いろいろ気分を害されるでしょうしね。
Oishi-san was, in his own way, rather courteous. Even so, I didn't want my parents hearing me talk to the police. I brought the cordless phone with me as I dashed back to my room on the second floor.
夜分遅くにすみませんですね。
I think that's funny because he has a phone in his room. They see it right on the left.
実は昨日渡した電話番号のメモ、あれ古い番号だったんです。本当に申し訳ない。これから申し上げる番号を控えておいてもらえますか。
あ、はい。どうぞ。
He gave me the number for his direct line as I wrote it down. I thought that was the end of it, but he began making pointless small talk, and it was pretty hard to hang up.
さて、どうでしょう、前原さん。何か変わったことはありましたか？
I see. This was the real reason. He really beat around the bush there. His adult conversational skills left me slack-jawed.
大石さんはここの地元の方ですか？
ええ、そうです。生まれも育ちも沖宮ですよ。
Was this supposed to be the early 80s? I never got that impression, but then again I never looked into it. If he's not from around here, he might
あ
know.
の、大石さん、鬼隠しって何のことか知ってますか？
それはですね、人が鬼にさらわれ忽然といなくなってしまうことなんです。このあたり独特の言い回しですね。世間様で言う神隠しと同じ意味です。
Whereas my friends would say they didn't know when I asked, this older man gave me a direct answer. Is there a male servant you wished had been gender bent? Not really. I think when they do male servants, they have a pretty good head about making them, decent male characters. And I don't think they need any more gender bends. They can, and I can appreciate them, but they don't have to. It made me a bit happy that he answered me directly without trying to hide anything.
平見沢は、前原さんにこんなこと言っていいんでしょうか。
What did you mention to me on the first stream, Chris? Was that the year it took place in? Maybe.
もっ
Maybe
た
I
いぶらないで
forgot
くださ
that.
いよ。大石さんが言わないなら俺も何も言いませんよ。
It just never really felt like the 80s to me.
ああ、いやいや、そういう意味じゃないんですよ。ただその気を悪くされないかと思いましてね。
I think Berserkers, they decided to make them start talking because otherwise they would not be able to develop them well as characters. And Nasu can't really seem to do anything without making characters spout like 1,000 lines. Did they gender bend Merlin? They did gender bend Merlin, but they should... I don't know. I think it made sense to give a gender bent Merlin since we had a gender bent Arthur, but it's in their respective worlds, so it's okay. You know what I mean? That's okay, I suppose.
鬼って地獄にいる金棒を持ったあの？
というよりは人食い鬼ですな。里に降りてきて人をさらって食い散らかしてしまう。なんて怖い昔話があるんですよ。
たたりと鬼隠しは一緒に起こるって言ってましたけど、どういうことですか？
Well, it's still a gender bend. They just justified it as, oh, this is the Merlin from another universe, which is fine. But it's still, that's just the excuse behind the gender bend, not the fact that it is a gender bend. Higurashi set in 1983. Gotcha. I already knew about the mysterious deaths happening 5 years in a row. But I didn't know there were people disappearing in those same 5 years.
たたりと鬼隠しが必ず一緒に？それは初めて聞きました。そうなんですか、前原さん。
それは俺が聞きたいですよ。
Well, that would explain though they don't have like shit tons of things like video games and stuff.
レナとミオンが話してたんです。お社様のたたりなら必ずたたりと鬼隠しが起こるって。
Oshi-san began hemming and hawing on the other end of the receiver. Maybe something about that came to mind?
前原さん、最初の事件ご存知ですよね。バラバラ殺人。
ええ、6人の犯人のうち1人はまだ逃走中なんですよね。
例えばそれ、逃走中じゃなく、鬼隠しにあったんじゃないでしょうかね。
Huh? It was an outrageous hypothesis from Oishi-san. The incident 4 years ago was the particularly ghastly one. The police already knew the perpetrators, so they posted tons of wanted posters with his face on them. They staked out various locations and investigated every possible escape route he had, but after 4 years, there wasn't even a hint of where he might be. But after 4 years, there wasn't even a hint— oh wait, whoops. Unless the police were completely incompetent. Even if it was an outrageous hypothesis, I couldn't simply laugh it off.
じゃあその翌年の事故はどうです？誘致派の男と妻が一緒に事故死したんですよね。
実はですね、正式には事故死したのは夫だけなんです。妻は死体が上がりませんでしたから。現行法では死体が発見されない限り行方不明扱いなんですよ。
At the time of the incident, with the river below the cliff being muddy rapids, the police divers had searched every branch of, off the main stream of the river for dozens of miles, but in the end, they weren't able to find her body.
でも死体が見つからないだけで亡くなったんですよね。
You want Wacky Woohoo Pizza Man here? Who the hell is Wacky Woohoo Pizza Man?
鬼隠しとは違うんじゃないですか？
死体が出ない以上、亡くなったとは言えません。法律で定めた年月が過ぎるまで生存扱いなんです。
I'm not sure if it was right to call that being demoned away. The wife is missing. At least that part was
3
reality.
年目はどうなんですか？神主は病死、妻は自殺ですよ。
前原さん、実はね、これも全く同じなんですよ。
The wife had supposedly thrown herself into the bottomless marsh deep in the forest around Hinamizawa, meaning it's all circumstantial evidence. They simply found her suicide note in front of the marsh. A diver was able to recover a few of her articles, but they weren't able to find a body. The investigative headquarters believed she had faked her death and was still alive somewhere.
これらを鬼隠しと呼んでいいかちょっとわかりませんがね。前原さんの言う通り、確かに毎年一人行方。
今年の事件では富武さんの連れの女の人が行方不明。じゃあ去年の主婦の撲殺事件はどうです？
Oh, Dante. Duh. Okay. That's what you mean by Woohoo Pizza.
誰か行方不明になりましたか？
Yes, I've played the beginning of, at the very least, the beginning of Devil May Cry 3, so I've seen a
犯人
scene
は
with that.
逮捕されたんですよね。
逮捕されてます。以前に逮捕歴もあるやつでしてね。別件で取り調べ中に犯行を自供してます。
We were debating getting pizza today.
ですがですね。
We might. Will Higurashi be in the next voting poll? If I decide after the Onikakushi hen arc that it's just not getting enough views, I won't even bother putting it on the next poll, and I want to switch to something else just to try for variety.
犯人逮捕からしばらくして被害者宅の子供が行方不明になったんです。
You think Pyra and Mithra are going to show up? You know, I haven't even made that assumption yet myself, so I haven't been speculating. I just want the game to surprise me in that regard.
犯罪に巻き込まれたのかどうなのか現在も捜査してます。
だって犯人は捕まったんですよね。それともその仲間が？
さあ、多分単独犯だと思います。もっとも今では確かめようもないんですよ。実はその男、
I've never had a broccoli
取り調べ
pizza.
中に拘置所内でお亡くなりになっちゃいまして。
Well, that's good. The people who are, like, in the silence, just watching the stream and enjoying it, you know, definitely let me know. That always helps. The viewership shows. He swallowed a spork and choked to death. A spork? It's not known whether it was an accident or suicide.
過去5年間必ず
They had
死者と行方
sporks in the
不明
80s
者が
too?
一人ずつ出ているわけなんですよね。
そうなります。いえね、私も驚いていますよ。こんな共通項には気づきませんでした。
I couldn't believe this could help lead to the closing of those incidents. It was just something they had in common.
例えば鬼隠しにあって失踪した人には何か共通点があるとか。
My wife likes pineapple pizza. Oishi-san mumbled as he seemed to be thinking about it. So I summarized the events.
1年目はダムの作業員、
That goddamn employee.
2年目は誘致派の男の妻、
Is it a goddamn?
3年目は神主の妻、4年目は被害者宅の子供で、5年目は交際相手かな。特につながりはなさそうだし。
The food of your choice will end your life tonight.
妻とか交際相手とか。
Has anyone heard that? That was an SNL skit, wasn't it? It does seem like there are a lot. Is 1.5k to 2.5k a good number of views? It's struggling a little, honestly. It depends on what's relative to the channel, but what I like to see is that by the end of the stream, when it finally goes public and is archived, there would have at least been 1,000 by that point. And that means the fourth year's victim child was a different... It would have really stood out if they were all married couples, except it's not just married couples, but parents and children as well. Come to think of it, I believe Tomitake-san also told me the younger brother is alive and has moved, if I recall correctly.
4年目に行方不明になった子供ってどんなだったんですか？
おとなしい感じの方だったらしいです。年はあなたの一つ上です。
Resident Evil 0 is pretty cool.
サトシさん。
Ariel must be reformed. She's eaten pepperoni pizza. She just prefers pineapple.
え？サトシ？
I remembered that name. Didn't they tell me Satoshi transferred out last
あなた
year?
の学校に去年まで通っていました。
Ah. So the previous year's disappearee was Satoshi.
話を聞いていませんか？
Come to think of it, when I transferred in, I believe they said my seat belonged to a recent transfer student. Then, where I sat, once belonged to the one who was demoned away? It was his seat? I recalled the cold sensation that came from that desk. It made my hair stand on end. It made your chair stand on end, that's kind of its job. The string of mysterious deaths. No. Well, Yashiro-sama's curse. I now know how it is connected to me, or how it connected to me. That chilling sensation, It was the feeling of Oyashiro-sama caressing the back of my neck.
お社様のたたりか。
You hope the Chrysler building is on the pole? I'll give it a shot. In all honesty, I was beginning to believe it. And I was scared. That's why I wanted to say it was a plot crafted by man and not the work of a curse. But the more I dug into it, the less likely that seemed. No, the more I dug, the more mysterious it became. If I kept digging, eventually, I'd reach the point where I'd learn something I really shouldn't know. To either be none the wiser, or to seek an answer I may regret. Which one would I be happier with? Maybe it'll be me next time. My execution could only be delayed for 1 year. That was when I remembered. Rena. Rena said she may be the next victim of the curse.
竜宮レナさんがですか？去年転校されてきた前原さんのクラスメートですよね。女の子には刺激の強い事件ばかりです。怖がるのも無理ないんじゃないでしょうかね。
It wasn't that. She said it might be her next. She said it in a way that made me think she had a concrete reason behind it.
もっと確信じみたものだったように思います。なんていうのか、その。
She was frightened. Her sudden change in demeanor. That someone who looked like Rena but wasn't Rena. That might be unrelated. All the strange things that I felt from Rena today came back to me.
そうですか。ではこちらでも少し調べてみます。前原さんも少し竜宮さんの様子に注意してあげてください。
それはレナを見張れってことですか？
そんな意味ではありませんよ、前原さん。お友達が次の被害者にならないよう少し気にしてあげてほしいと。
If Rex and Shulk were still alive, yeah, that'd be weird as hell. I don't want them to be too self-referential. I like it better when they can tell an original story, and then maybe, like they did with Xenoblade 2, have it have like an Easter eggy kind of connection to it, where you don't have to have played Xenoblade 1 to get all the appreciation of number 2. You like cheeseburger pizza? Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I saw the Silent Hill 3 thing. I don't know if I'll do that. We'll see. At that moment, just as my mouth was agape because I was so impressed with his mature, clever way with words. Knock, knock. A sudden knock at the door sent my heart racing. In an instant, I had pointlessly covered up the end of the receiver. On the other side of the door, I heard my father's oddly upbeat voice. What could it be? It's so
すみ
late.
ません、親父が来ました。今夜はこれくらいでいいですか？
ええ、夜分遅くに本当に申し訳ありませんでしたね。何か分かりましたら教えてください。こちらも進展がありましたらご報告では失礼します。
圭一、早く開けてくれ。父さん、両手が塞がってるんだ。
Silent Hill, is it good to play in the dark? Probably. What's on a cheeseburger pizza? Like, what, ground beef and probably lettuce and... I don't know, you could get clever with it. Well, just cheese and burger meat, sure, but I guess maybe the type of cheese would change too. Maybe more of like a cheddar than a mozzarella. What is Dad doing? I had stayed in the same position while on the phone the whole time, so my joints were aching. When I opened the door, I saw my father was standing there with a tray. On that tray, cookies and 2 cups of black tea, a fairly fancy spread for our household. There was even sugar and lemon slices on the side. Everything you could ask for. This was quite the show of hospitality.
何、父さん。それ何のつもりだよ。
もう、はぐらかすなよ、圭一。入るぞ。
Dad was in high spirits and had a smirk on his face. But for my entire life, I've never seen him act this hospitable. What had gotten into him?
で、何の話をしてたんだ？
I jumped. It's not something I had to keep from my father. But how could I explain it to him that I was talking to a detective this late at night?
別に何も。友達だよ。
電話の話じゃなくて、来てたんだろう、今。レナちゃんが。
Huh?
来てないよ。
もうごまかさなくたっていいぞ。さっきレナちゃんが遊びに来てたじゃないか。だいぶ話し込んでるみたいだったからお茶でもって思ったらすれ違いだったんだよ。
I had no idea what Dad was talking about, but a cold sweat dripped down my back.
どのくらい話し込んでたかな。
レナちゃんが2階に上がったのが半くらいだったから小1時間くらいかな。
2階に上がったの父さん見たの？
ああ見たよ。圭一の部屋は階段を上がって奥の扉だよって声もかけた。
Reina came to my house about an hour ago. Dad met her at the door and called out to me on the second floor. I probably didn't hear him because I was so focused on my conversation with Oishi-san. I didn't reply, but he knew I was in my room, so he had her come inside. Then told her my room was on the second floor. She thanked my dad and went upstairs. Then, about an hour passed. She passed by my dad just as she was bringing up tea and left. She came upstairs about an hour, and about an hour had passed. Then passed by my dad and returned home? And after she came upstairs and until she left, where was Reina? There's only a short hallway between my room and the stairs. Meaning Reina had for about an hour in the hall. No, she couldn't have been standing in front of my door all that time. The door to my room wasn't particularly thick. You could easily hear everything being said inside. All the unsettling and unguarded things I spoke to Oishi-san about began rushing through my head.
お父さん、あまりからかっちゃダメよ。それよりアトリエを片付けて。またこぼすわよ。
Mom yelled at Dad from downstairs. Dad left the tray with me and went downstairs with a disappointed chortle. I followed my dad out of the room with my eyes. I looked down at the floor around the hallway where Reina might have stood all that time. Just now, as I was talking to Oishi-san with my back turned, Reina was standing a mere 6 feet away the whole time? All that time in this dimly lit doorway? What did she see? What did she hear? For what reason? As the steam from the 2 teacups ominously wafted and twisted, the aroma of black tea filled my room. Her arms are gonna come through the wall and strangle him. No. She's not a ghost. Or is she? How many people will die in this VN? The question is how many people won't. Weariness and a headache, though it does take a long, long time to get to the craziest stuff. But we're into the deeper part of this particular route. Not a very nice way to start the day.
どうしたの？ケイチ、今朝は顔色悪いわよ。昨べは何時に寝たの？
It seemed that my mom had noticed my sullen state. Yesterday, I kept on waking up in the middle of the night. Without a doubt, I felt a presence. I felt the presence of someone standing in front of my door. I told myself repeatedly that it was just my imagination, and forced myself to try and sleep. Except not being able to stand it, I gathered up my courage and opened the door. Of course there wasn't anyone there. I think I did this 3 times throughout the night. Or maybe I just didn't remember doing it any more than that. Even though I was able to get to the breakfast table without incident, I still didn't feel at ease.
風邪かもしれない。なんだか食欲ないんだ。
あら、ちょっと熱あるんじゃない？どうする？学校行ける？
Technically, I did go to a school, but it was mostly self-study. It wouldn't matter much if I missed a day, would it? It could have been that I hadn't been feeling well for the last few days because I really did have a cold. If I took some medicine and got a good day's rest, I might be able to greet everyone with a smile tomorrow. Oh? Startled, I looked back and forth between the entrance and the clock. It was 10 minutes later than when I usually met up with Reina. It was
レナ
Reina.
ちゃん迎えに来ちゃったけど、どうする？お休みする？
Reina was a good girl. She might be somewhat quirky, but she was certainly cute. The lunches she made were delicious, and she always looked out for me. Why should I be so scared of something like that? It wasn't Rena's fault. It was probably mine. It had to have been my cold. It just had to be.
休む。ごめん。
じゃあ母さんが断ってきてあげるわね。
You didn't have to repeat yourself. Yeah, I might consider Resident Evil 0 on a poll, but I can't say for sure just yet. We're still trying to get this thing done, too. Mom headed off to the door. I would have to pass by the entrance to get back to my room. I didn't have the nerve to meet with Reina, so I wrapped myself in a blanket on the sofa and closed my eyes. I was so sleep-deprived, I quickly fell into a deep slumber. I had only intended to lie down for a bit, but it was almost noon when I woke up. I called out to my parents, but they didn't seem to be around. On the table, I found a lunch prepared and a note. Mom and Dad had apparently driven off somewhere far away. It likely had to do with Dad's work. This happened every so often, so it wasn't that unusual. They would be back for dinner, but it might be a bit late. On the note it said, "The insurance card is in the cabinet. Take it and go to the hospital." There was also a well-drawn map to the hospital. That's right. I hadn't been there before, so I didn't know exactly where it was. I had a light lunch, although it was really just leftovers from the morning, and just in case, went to the hospital. Normally, I'd never be here in the middle of a weekday. Just walking around like this had me feeling guilty. It was an odd feeling. Following my mom's map, I took a road I usually never used. After walking for a bit, the hospital sign came into view. Irie Clinic was written rather stylishly on the sign. The clinic wasn't very big, but based on the scale of the rest of Hinamizawa, it was far too grand. There was a parking lot and even a reserved spot for buses. They must be making a mint. I spaced out in the air-conditioned waiting room until it was my turn to be seen.
前原さん、診察室へどうぞ。
Yes, it takes place in 1983. After half-heartedly answering all of the chatty doctor's questions, he responded with the old, "It's probably a cold." They gave me a shot and 3 days worth of medicine. See, we don't get shots for colds much in the US. We just get told to drink a lot of fluids. Have I seen the new Stranger Things episodes? No, I have not. I thought it was a little overboard. But if it would clear away the gloomy feeling I'd been having lately, then it was worth it. Yeah, they got a dinosaur on the desk. I settled the bill and took a quick trip to the washroom. As I was leaving, I overheard a conversation between some elderly people who seemed to be regulars at the clinic. Of course, I had no intention of eavesdropping. If it wasn't for that word.
やっぱりOnikakushiかいね。
Ah,
どうかね。
superstitious villagers.
まだ若い子だけや。駆け落ちかもしられへん。どこの誰とよ。季節のたびに東京もんが来ちょったろ。でっけえカメラ持った若者が。
Who's my favorite? I think I like Mio.
あれと仲が良きゃったって話。知られへんの？
Were they talking about Tomitake-san? I could feel my ears perking up.
そら知らんけど。でも、普通駆け落ちっても仁義あるだろう。書き置きとか辞表とか書かんかいね。
すったらんかかんから駆け落ち言うんね。わきゃ看護師さんの顔見られんようなるんは寂しいね。
高野さんはしっかり者よ。どこへ行ってもやっていけろん。
So her name was Takano-san. That woman with Tomitake-san. And she worked at this clinic? Oyashiro-sama's shadow was following me everywhere I went. I started listening more closely, but they began talking about fishing, and it didn't seem like they were going to revisit the topic. I gave up and left. Thus, Even though I was separated from the daily monotony of school, I wasn't able to escape from Oyashiro-sama's shadow. But of course, Oyashiro-sama was the guardian deity of this place, of Hinamizawa. As long as I was in Hinamizawa, I couldn't be able to escape, or I wouldn't be able to. Take some water. Maybe it was because I was walking outside, but my appetite had suddenly returned. I might as well buy a snack with the change from the examination fee on the way home. Contemplating that, I turned onto a familiar street. At that moment, I heard a car horn abruptly honk behind me. Was I really walking so far into the middle of the road where I'd be in a car's way? I moved farther off to the side, but the horn was still honking at me. I turned around, peeved. Oh, it's you. It was Oishi-san. He stepped out of his car, AC on full blast, and waved at me.
今日はどうしたんです？学校はお休みですか？
ちょっと体調悪かったんで、今日は休みました。お昼を買って帰ろうとしてたところです。
そりゃよかった。実は私、お昼に行こうとしてたんですよ。ああ、お体に触るようでしたら構いませんよ。
I was just gonna lie down after going home anyway. And I didn't really have a cold.
地元の食堂だと嫌でしょう。町まで行きましょう。ちょっと走りますがよろしいですかな？私、おいしいお店知ってるんですよ。
I'd finally begun to understand Oishi-san's roundabout way of saying things. He probably wanted to talk to me about stuff that would be difficult to discuss while in Hinamizawa. Follow the creepy human. The adult. I went with Oishi-san riding in his frigid car. It was almost as if the bright sunlight outside was a lie.
昨夜は遅くまですみませんでしたね。ご家族に怒られませんでしたか？
いえ。
I could definitely see somebody saying that it's slow. But if you are really into Higurashi and you want those extra details and that kind of more atmospheric experience, this probably does a better job than the TV series does. What about the local places? They just... Hinamizawa has, you know, it's a central rural town, but then around kind of like the outskirts, I guess, is like the more main city that, I forgot what they called it, but, yeah, he's gonna drive him there. Even now, in the brightness of the sunlight, the thought still creeped me out. With a big bump that jolted the car, the road connecting to the city changed from dirt to pavement. My head swiveled back with a sudden realization. That's right. This is where Tomitake-san died.
Tomitake-sanの捜査は暗礁に乗り上げています。
Okinomiya. Okay, there you go. Oishi-san spoke while peering at me from the corner of his eye.
自分の爪で喉をかき破るという異常さから、幻覚作用のある何らかの薬物によるものだと信じているのですが、こういう症状、それも急激に引き起こす薬物はなかなかないらしいんです。もちろん、検視解剖もそれを念頭に置いて十分に行ったのですが、手がかりはやはりありませんでした。
漫画なんかによくあるじゃないですか。体内に取り込まれると分解したりして、証拠が何も残らないなんて、そんな薬。
ありますよ。塩化錯視、何でしたっけ。まあ、結構あります。でもですね、富武さんのような症状を引き起こす薬物には、そういうものはないそうなんですよ。
じゃあ、警察は富武さんは叩いて死んだってそう言うんですか？
I couldn't help but feel that the police were worthless. I just wanted the idea of a curse to be disassociated from Tomitake-san's mysterious
悔
death.
しいですが今のところは。ですが死因はともかく死ぬ前に何人かの人間に囲まれて暴行を受けたことだけは間違いありません。たたりでなく人間が事件に関わっているのは疑いようがありませんよ。
That made me a bit relieved. We passed in front of the rather desolate, but still busier than Hinamizawa, train station. The car pulled into a restaurant parking lot, and I followed Oishi-san into the shop. It was pretty crowded, but they were only adults at this hour. Of course there wouldn't be children in here in the middle of a weekday.
2名です。タバコは、我慢します。
I'll make do without smoking.
こちらへどうぞ。
Good for you.
ご注
for
文
now.
がお決まりになりましたらお呼びください。
We were led by a peculiarly, that's a hard word for some reason, peculiarly dressed waitress to our table. I sat with Oishi-san in the booth.
どうです。このお店のウェイトレスさんの格好、可愛らしいと思いません？
Now, it's weird for him to say that.
まあ
Because
その
how old are you? And these are
どうでしょうね。
like high school girls.
このお店ね、いっつも
I mean, saying they're
大
cute
人
is
気な
one
んで
thing,
す
I
よ。
suppose.
お料理よりもウェイトレスさんがね。
ああ大石さん目がやらしいですよ。
うん？そうですか？
How can you tell? My eyes aren't open. I can look at everything with my eyes closed. Regardless of how the waitress looked, the food was decent enough. Finishing our meals while talking about the same inane topic, Oishi-san's after-meal cup of coffee arrived at the table.
昨日、ひなみ沢の昔話が出ましたよね。
ええ人食い鬼の里だって言われてたって話でしたっけ？
私もあんまり詳しい方じゃないので、うちのばあ様に今朝ちょっと聞いてみたんです。
Oishi-san took out the notepad that was stuffed into his breast pocket.
なんでもですね、大昔はひなみ沢は鬼ヶ淵って呼ばれてたんだそうです。
鬼ヶ淵すごい名前ですね。
今でもその名前残ってるんですよ。神主の妻が受水自殺した沼の名前は今でも鬼ヶ淵というんです。
Yeah, it does look like really good stuff.
沼の底の底は鬼たちの住む国とつながってると言われてたんだそうです。
Of course, nobody had told me anything about such an ominous marsh.
でですね、鬼ヶ淵は恐れられていたと同時に崇められてもいたんだそうです。
Respect born of fear. I guess you could say it was kind of a deification. A village of inhuman
鬼
creatures.
たちはある種の仙人でもあったらしいんですよ。例えば不治の病にかかった村人を鬼ヶ淵に運んで治してもらったりとかしたんだそうです。
Even if we are calling them demons, Tengu, long-nosed goblins, or Senin would be a more apt description.
鬼って言ってもそんなに悪い人たちじゃないみたいですね。
でもそこはやっぱり人食い鬼らしいんです。ばあ様に聞いた昔話ではですね、息子を治療してもらった代償として連れてきた母親を食わせろと。
息子を治療してもらった対価が自分ですか？それは怖いな。
もちろん母親は息子を連れて逃げます。これをですね、鬼ヶ淵に住む村人鬼たちがですね、全員で追いかけて取り囲んで捕まえたんだそうです。
The entire village, apparently. That's quite a frightening thing to imagine.
結局母親も息子も捕まって食べられちゃったんだそうです。おしまい。
その話
Which ice cream looked better, left or right? I liked the straw thing that was in the other one. So maybe the one on the right.
当事者の2人が食べられちゃったんですからその話が残るはずがありません。
ありゃ。
昔話はこういうの多いですよね。
What is my biggest stream? I don't remember. I think 10 hours? I think I streamed. Probably my biggest stream was when I did Song of Saya. I did the whole damn thing in one go. On. It wasn't Halloween, but. In contrast to the ghastly tale, Oishi-san laughed heartily while sipping his coffee.
でもですね、他の昔話にも結構あるらしいんですよ。鬼ヶ淵の鬼たちが総出で獲物を捕まえに来るというのは。
I recall that Mion said that all the villagers united and fought against the dam construction. I saw similarities with how that part of unification overlapped.
鬼たちの獲物は常に一人で、しかも前もって決められているらしいんです。
え？
That caught my attention. Oishi-san also appeared to be pondering what it meant.
ばあ様が言うにはですね、鬼の狩りの時には絶対に邪魔をしてはいけない。家に閉じこもって布団をかぶってろって言うんです。
What was your favorite Song of Saya ending? I think the most morbid one, for sure, is the one where Saya does succeed in replenishing the world or birthing all of her kind into the world. And, like, the dude's friend is, like, all by himself, and I think he takes a gun to his head, because it's just so fucking creepy. I know it's depressing as hell, but it's certainly interesting.
獲物の人を助けたり、かくまったりしてはいけないんだそうです。鬼の狩りを邪魔しない限り、村人には危害を加えない。そういうルールなんだそうです。
Basically, don't help the victims. Pretend you didn't see the atrocities, in other
ル
words.
ールを破ったらどうなるんです？
さあ、何しろ人食い鬼ですからね。
Many parts of that tale caught my attention. Is this game scarier than Song of Saya? I don't think so, Succubus Sakura. Song of Saya is my favorite work of horror anything. Such a crazy fucking story. I don't know if that can be topped. It's still fascinating, but in a different way. Parts of the story he told me overlapped with his theory that the entire village was in on the crime. Even if it wasn't the whole village, it was conceivable that the villagers were hiding under the covers and leaving them to die, when there's a group that was on their hunt, wasn't it? I didn't dare speak
じ
it.
ゃあ大石さんはやっぱり村ぐるみもしくは村人数人の犯行だと見てるんですね。
You're going to the store, how long will I stream? I don't know. Let's see, it's 3:34 right now. I'm thinking till about, like, 5 o'clock, so maybe, like, 90 more minutes. This is a bit of a shorter one, I think, this time. It's like 3 hours. You find this game scarier? Wow, I don't see how anyone could.
前原さんはどう思います？ああ、すみません。コーヒーのおかわりいいですか？
I would assume that if you're putting lemon in a drink, it would be a slice and not the whole fucking lemon. That's what I wanted to know. It seemed that we were both waiting for the other to say that last part. He waited for the waitress to finish pouring coffee before
去
speaking.
年、サトシ君が失踪した頃から、私は不審に感じていたんです。
Oishi-san muttered as he watched the milk swirl around in his coffee. My god, the music in Saya, though.
それで、サトシさんのお友
It just
達
feels so, like,
つまり、
whispery
前
and
原さんのお友達グル
alien.
ープの皆さんをちょっぴりだけ、本当にちょっぴりだけですよ。調べさせてもらったんです。
If Oishi-san had said this to me before, I would have gotten angry at him for calling my friends into question. But as I was now, I couldn't.
とてもつまらない話になります。
前原さんがつまらないと感じたらいつでもおっしゃってください。終わりにしますので。
Oishi-san was wearing the most serious expression I'd ever seen from him. It was as if he was telling me to prepare myself and listen. There were quite a few things I regretted hearing from Oishi-san, but none of them were as threatening as this. A little voice inside me was screaming like an alarm. Stop, Keiichi. This is probably the last one. I took a deep breath and silenced that voice. I would not run from the truth. That was all I could utter. Oishi-san stared into my eyes, silently waiting for a few moments. After he was certain I was ready, he began.
1年目の事件の被害者は現場の監督さんだったんですが、事件の数週間前に園崎美音さんと取っ組み合いをしてるんですよ。何度か。
Oishi had said before that Mion had defied the dam project vehemently? Well, it wasn't hard to imagine how she'd be if she got worked up.
2年目の事件で誘致派の夫婦が事故に遭いましたよね。現場にはお嬢さんも一緒にいたんです。それが北条聡子さんなんです。
Huh?
貞子って貞子?
Oishi-san's look told me that my voice was too loud. I realized it as well and quickly quieted
3
down.
年目には神主夫婦が亡くなられますよね。そのお嬢さんが古出里香さんです。
リカちゃんが?
4年目に亡くなった主婦はもうわかりますね。北条聡子さんの義理のおばです。当時は聡子さんはご両親を事故で失っていましたので預けられていたのです。被害者宅に。
I could tell my lips were getting dry. I didn't even have the wits to keep my mouth from hanging agape. I had thought it was nothing but a bizarre incident, one that I could easily distance myself from. But clicking and clacking, it had snuck all the way to my
ち
feet.
なみに4年目に失踪した北条聡さんは聡子さんの実の兄になります。
So Satoshi is Satoko's brother.
ちょっと待ってください。
I don't know if it's strawberry shortcake, but it's just strawberry cake is what it says. Strawberry cakey. Yeah, it's right there. 280 yen is about, like, you can usually just chop off the zero. So it's like $2, 80 cents. Not, I guess for a slice of cake, that's not too bad. Depends on how big the slice is. If it's in Japan, I imagine it'd be a pretty wimpy piece of cake. It took everything I had to finally say that. I gulped down a glass of water and once again wiped my face with a napkin. Calm down, Keiichi Maibara. But Oishi-san was relentless. Instead of waiting for me to finish sorting out my feelings, he just started speaking again. The last of the things I shouldn't have heard.
被害者たちはなぜかあなたのお友達グループに全てつながるのです。
偶然に決まってるじゃないですか。
前原さん、静かに、静かに。
So, Satoko's parents were supporters of the dam project. And so, that's where the victims were that year. Ever since, Satoko and her brother were staying with an aunt and uncle. Or I guess like a step aunt and uncle or whatever. And then the next year, or something like that, or maybe a year in between, I can't remember, Satoshi disappeared, and the aunt was the one murdered. Or died. And Rika's fucking parents died too, that sucks. But they said that Rika's mother had committed suicide, but they believe she probably vanished because of, yeah, everything. They couldn't find the body, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, I did notice that Charlie was added to FGO. A lot of people are excited about that.
みんな見てます
It was a
よ
matter of time. I'm glad they did it. Mion? Satoko? Rika-chan? So what if they're all connected? You're telling me all of my friends? It couldn't be. It just couldn't be. Oh, Reina is different, isn't she? Well, 300 yen for a whole cake would be a steal. 300 yen for a slice of cake. Reina isn't connected with the victims at all.
竜宮レナさんは去年まで茨城の郊外にお住まいでした。まあ確かに
It goes the dam worker, Rika's parents, Satoko's parents, Satoshi, and aunt. Huh, okay. Does that mean that Rika was living with Satoko and her parents at the time? When did Rika start living with her parents? Or with Satoko, sorry. Because they lived together. He said it in a roundabout way. Is he saying she's also connected?
実は調べてみたら竜宮さんは引っ越しの少し前に
Oh, right.
学校で謹
Rena's
慎
past
処分を
too.
受けているんですよ。なんでも学校中のガラスを割って回ったんだとか。
レナが学校中のガラスを割った
That same spacey Rena had? I couldn't even imagine it.
3日間の謹慎が明けた後も復学しなかったようです。その間に神経科に通院し、何週間かの間、投薬と医師によるカウンセリングを受けています。
I wonder if it was something like a nervous breakdown. I'd heard that it happens to people who are really methodical or overly sensitive. Neither of those matched Reina's easygoing personality.
でですね、そのカウンセリングをした医師のカルテに、レナさんの会話内容が記載されているんですがね、その中に出てくるんですよ。結構。
何がです
I pressed forward carelessly. There couldn't be anything more for me to regret.
出てくるんですよ。お社様って単語が。
It felt like someone's stone-cold hand was caressing my back. Why? Why had Rena spoken of Oyashiro-sama before she even came to Hinamizawa?
お社様っていう幽霊みたいなものがですね、夜な夜な自宅にやってくるっていうんですよ。枕元に立って自分を見下ろすんだって。
My mind froze. I couldn't process what I was being told.
その後、しばらくしてひなみ沢に引っ越されたんです。ああ、そうそう。レナさんはよそ者なんかじゃないですよ。
え？
住民票で分かったんですが、竜宮一家は元はひなみ沢の住人です。レナさんがちょうど小学校に上がるときに茨城へ引っ越されたんです。
My mind went completely blank. It was similar to the static you'd see on a blank TV channel. My ears began ringing as I lost all sense of
前
comprehension.
原さん、大丈夫ですか？もう終わりにしましょうか。
Those words brought me back. I couldn't let it end
レナ
here.
のことが分かりました。じゃあその最後の被害者の富武さんはどうなんですか？誰と接点があるんですか？
Irritated, I let out one final reprisal.
全員ですよ。お忘れですか、前原さん。みんなで楽しくお祭りの晩を過ごしたじゃないですか。何人もの警官が皆さんの楽しそうな様子を見ていますよ。
Now there was nothing I could respond with. I fell silent as my brain turned to mush.
そろそろ出ましょう。ああ、前原さん。お昼の薬は飲みましたか？
I'd completely forgotten about the medicine I'd gotten today until Oishi-san said that. I got another glass of water and we left the shop after I chugged it down. Hey, Caitlin P., how's it going? You were late. let's see. Sorry, what did you miss? A couple of important developments. So, obviously, we found out from this guy, Oishi-san, that Tomitake, the photographer, died the night of the festival, the Wataganashi Festival, that's what it was called, the cotton drifting one. And Keiichi's been kind of getting more and more paranoid ever since. One thing that really didn't help is when he was asking Rena if there was anything she was hiding from him. Anything at all that her and the group just won't tell him. And then she kind of got all confrontational and she's like, well, aren't you lying to us also? We saw you go into that guy's car and you were talking to him, and what's that all about, you know? And so she says everyone's got secrets, you know, and she was acting real creepy about it. And so that freaked the hell out of Keiichi. And then later that night, when he was all paranoid, he got another call from Oishi, and he was talking to him about some of the things he had talked about with Reina and whatnot. And we'd found out, presumably, that Reina came to visit Keiichi while he was on the phone call, walked up to his room, and stood, like, outside his door for, like, an hour, listening in on the conversation. So now he's, like, real freaked out. And now we're learning the true nature of the various victims of the curse of Oyashiro-sama that have happened over the years. We found out that the shrine maiden and husband who had died, the priest and the maiden, the husband died, and the woman committed suicide, but they were never able to find her, which means she vanished. And that was Rena's parents. And then we found out that Satoko's parents were killed. And ever since, Satoko has been living with her uncle and aunt. And then the other year, the aunt died, and Satoko's brother, Satoshi, is the one who ran away, or vanished, or whatever. You know, we never saw him again. And ever since then, well, yeah, and now this year, Tomitake-san died, and the lady he was with is the one that vanished. Sorry, Rika's parents, not Rena. Rena's parents are fine, as far as we know. Rika's parents. Rika being the shrine maiden girl, her parents who ran the shrine before her died. Yes, you're absolutely right. Rika, Rena, easy to mistake, my bad. I got another glass of water when we left the shop after I chugged it down. I already read that part. We got in the car and returned to Hinamizawa via the rough road. I never really paid attention when I was on my bike, but did cars normally shake this much? Do you think the Zohar or Zohar emulator will wind up in Xenoblade 3? Not necessarily the conduit, considering what it could. It would make sense if it showed up there, but it would need a good explanation, because presumably the conduit disappeared after the end of 2. It was almost as if the road was desperately trying to tell me something. That big jolt. Oh yeah, oh wait, we also found out that Rena, right, he just told us this too, that Rena used to live in Hinamizawa, but then they moved when she was like in elementary school or something. And then more recently, before she moved back to Hinamizawa, there was an incident at her school where she like bashed in all the windows. And so she had to see like a therapist and all that crap, and that happened, and then they moved back. So the sweet little Rena has had a violent streak. I was certain that I heard Tomitake-san scream. I sat in silence, just letting myself be shaken by the car.
お家の前まで送りましょう。今日は病気でお休みだったんですよね。長々とお話ししてしまって申し訳ありませんでした。
なんで俺に話すんですか?
I blurted out the question. Really just blurted it out. I didn't expect an answer.
私、一応確認しましたよね。お話やめましょうかって。
じゃなくて、どうして俺に接触してきたんですか?
I understood quite well that Oishi-san was investigating the string of suspicious incidents, but why was he telling me all this? I knew nothing and I couldn't help. Everything Oishi-san spoke of was news to me. First of all, what could I, having just moved here, possibly know? By chance, if there was a reason for Oishi-san to reach out to me, then it would have to be that I was part of Mion's circle of friends who looked suspicious to Oishi-san.
私ね、今年で定年なんです。定年したらばあ様の意向で引っ越しちゃう予定なんですよ。だからこそ在職中にこの事件だけははっきりさせておきたかったんです。
で、大石さんは疑ってるんですよね。みんなを。
Oishi-san didn't really give a response. It felt a little late, but I thought it was his way of showing a bit of consideration for my
これ
feelings.
はこの道30年の間です。前原さん、危ないのはあなたなんですよ。
I wanted to reply with, "That's absurd," but my downtrodden state, I couldn't bring myself to say it.
私は今年で定年ですから、来年の綿流しの日にはもういません。だから今年中に決着をつけたいのです。
In other words, he was insinuating that on the next Watakanashi, I might be the victim.
所長からも注意を受けています。一連の事件は個々に解決しているから蒸し返すなという、これは一種の圧力です。
Have you seen Prisma Phantasm? No.
圧力って何のですか？
I know Carnival Phantasm, and I know Fate Grand Carnival, and I know Prisma Ilia, but not a combination of Prisma Phantasm.
ひなみ沢の誰かですよ。着きました。この辺でいいですか？
After some time, the car finally reached the path to my house. The clock read 2 p.m. I was surprised so little time had passed since we ate. It was hot outside the car. The chirping of the Higurashi hurt my ears.
今日の話は全て忘れてくださっても結構です。ですが、私は捜査を続けますよ。お社様のたたりは今年で終わらせます。
何かあったら連絡しろってことですか？
いいんですよ。前原さんがどうしても連絡したくなった時だけでいいんです。
I wasn't collected enough to understand Oishi-san's roundabout way of saying it.
ゆっくり休んでください。病気でお休みの時によくない話ばかりして申し訳ありませんでしたね。
I didn't really give any sort of response.
私はいつでもあなたの味方です。それだけは信じといてくださいよ。それじゃあ、失礼。
The tires crunched over the dirt road as the car made a U-turn and disappeared into a cloud of kicked-up dust. It felt like I was watching a boat only throw me a lifesaver in shark-infested waters before disappearing into the distance. That was the first time I thought Oishi-san was being unfair. Telling me I was going to be the next victim than just saying to contact him if something happened. This wasn't a criminal investigation. He was fishing. And I was just the bait dangling off the line. Would the fish be the perpetrator? Or was it really just Oyashiro-sama's curse? Either way, the bait would be swallowed whole.
畜生、俺死にたくないよ。
For some time, I could do nothing but stare at the puddle of water left behind from the AC of the car. I don't know if anything specific happens at 2 p.m. I think it was just... Oh, wait, you're talking to Timothy. Sorry. You do your thing. I wonder how much time had passed since I laid down. It was getting dark outside. My body was soaked in sweat. It would probably be a good idea to change my sheets. At that moment, the phone downstairs rang. It was probably Mom. Mom was quite the worrywart. And maybe she had called many times, but I just didn't notice it.
もしもし、前原ですけど。
お、生きてた。もしもし、ミオンだけど、具合はどう？
圭一のお友達ですか？圭一は休んでますけど。変わりましょうか？
あ、お父様で？すみません。
Sneaky bastard.
バカで引っかかってやがるよ。
え？ケイちゃん？
After our exchange, we both had a good laugh together. Except I was suspicious of her even as we were laughing. Was everybody really involved in the incidents? The fact that I couldn't say no saddened me.
元気そうで安心したよ。レナもすっごく心配してたよ。さとこはざまあないですわって喜んでたな。リカちゃんは病気でかわいそうですってさ。
チェ、みんなで勝手に大盛り上がりしてたみたいだな。
まあまあ。でさ、ケンちゃん。
Yes, Higurashi gives you... It's a red herring, right? Like a fake lead, kind of? Is that what that term refers to? It gives you a lot of false leads and bits of information that you think are helpful, but turns out they're not.
お見舞いにじゃあ都合悪いかな。
お見舞い?
And the way that it's split up is all of these arcs at the beginning of the game are called the question arcs. And some of the arcs will be considered the answer arcs, where they show you everything happening from a different perspective. And you're like, oh, it makes so much sense. But not until later. They let you remember or remain kind of confused on purpose.
いいよ、そんな。重病人ってわけじゃないんだから。
うちのバッチャが山ほどおはぎを作ってさ、お裾分けに持ってけって言ってんだよ。だから持ってくね。
おいおい、風が移っても知らねえぞ。
おじさんもレナもおバカさんだから大丈夫。じゃあね、すぐ行くから。
So far, everything said so far has been true, though. Ren is coming too? That's what it sounded like. I was still concerned about meeting Reina, but I guess if she was with Mion... I heard the doorbell 10 minutes later. Finally, the moment in the thumbnail!
ちゃんと薬飲んで寝てた？
そりゃもうしっかりとな。
元気そうでよかった。心配してたんだよ。
悪かったな。明日にはもう大丈夫だよ。
Mion showed a complete lack of concern for someone who's recovering, and Reina looked like she was worried about me from the bottom of her heart. It didn't look like there was anything behind those expressions.
ちょっとお邪魔しようかと思ったけど、まだ本調子じゃないみたいだね。
そうか?
It seemed my face appeared a bit sullen.
じゃあこれ、ケイチ君。
See ya, Connor.
みーちゃんのおばあちゃんが作ってくれたおはぎだよ。
Reina held out the package wrapped in newspaper. There might be about 5 in here. It was quite hefty.
な、サンキューな。ミオンのばあちゃんによろしく伝えといてくれよ。
あ、その中にね、レナが作ったのも混じってるんだよ。ケイチ君に見つけられるかな。これ、今日の部活を欠席したケイちゃんへの宿題ね。
Is it P that changes the art style? Oh yeah, is this the art you say you like? Because I don't like it nearly as much. It's got more like shading and detail, but it doesn't get their personalities quite right.
おはぎにアルファベットがついてるから、明日回答すること。
お見舞いなのか部活なのか、どっちかにしろ。
元気。これなら明日は大丈夫そうだね。
この騒ぎで熱がぶり返したらどうしてくれんだよ、まったく。
みーちゃん、あんまり騒いじゃ悪いよ。もう行こう。お家の人にも怒られるよ。
Both of them thought my parents were home. It was because the entranceway was a mess.
そうだね。もう行こうかね。あ、そう、ケイちゃん。
なんだよ。
お昼、何食べた？
The sudden question startled me, and I went wide-eyed when I saw Mion. I had never seen her like that, and it was a highly unsettling visage. But why is she asking me about what I ate for lunch? What she said was so inane, it was almost meaningless. The way she said it, it was almost like she didn't even care at all about what I ate.
表で食べたよ。
She must have suspected that I was with Oishi-san. Anyway, I felt that if I hesitated or tried to change the subject when they'd read too deep into it... they would read too too deep into it. So I tried answering as quickly as possible. Except, contrary to the efforts I'd made, there was a pause before they replied. I don't care for the original sprites. I did not like those ones.
ケイチ君、お昼は外食だったんだね。
The glimmer from Rena's eyes had changed at some point as well. It was now sharp, as if to make it feel the feigned ignorance behind her words even more. As if she already knew. That's how it looked to me.
どう？美味しかった？
なんでそんなことを聞くんだよ。
Mion was speaking in an unusually low tone. Almost as if she knew that I had eaten at the restaurant in town. No, I'm overthinking this. I mean, both of them should have been in school at lunchtime. There was no way they could have known where I was.
渋いおじさまとご一緒だったみたいだけど。誰？
The package with the mochi I was holding slipped out of my hands. I could tell the blood had drained from my face, making me go pale.
へえ、ケイチ君、それ誰？ひょっとして、この間の人かな？かな？
I like how she keeps her kana thing even if she's in creep mode. I could feel the back of my throat going dry. This is no longer a bluff. They knew everything?
なんでそんなことわかるんだよ。
I took everything I had to finally force those words from my throat. My knees were shaking.
さてね、おじさんにわからないことはないからね。
Mion sneered knowingly, and her laugh seemed to carry on forever.
で、ケイちゃん、何のお話をしてたの？ずいぶんと熱くなってたみたいだけど。
みんなの話はしてないよ。ミオンともレナとも関係ない。
ふん、聞いてもないのにレナたちの名前が出るなんて、なんだか怪しいな。
Rena's unwavering gaze pierced through my eyes and peered further inside me. I dug my own grave. My heart was throbbing so much it felt like I was going to explode.
何を隠れて
Or
や
it
ろ
was
うと
going to
も、
explode.
おじさ
And
ん
if your
には
heart
全て
explodes,
お見通
you
しって
explode.
こと。
Whatever. It's all bad.
それ
It's
だ
all
けを
bad
忘れ
stuff.
ないでくれればいいかな。
I couldn't even shake my head. It took everything I had to stop my teeth from chattering. She never let her gaze break from mine, even as she tilted her head slightly.
ケイチ君、顔色悪いよ。もう横になった方がいいと思うな。
そうだね。私たちはもう帰ろう。
As if nothing had happened, they both giggled at each other and started making their way out. I hadn't moved a muscle since I'd dropped the package of mochi. As they left, the door slowly closed behind them. All I could do was stare, as if I couldn't move until the door was completely closed. Just as the door was just about closed, it opened again slightly with a sudden creak, sending my heart racing once again. A single eye peered in through that narrow slit, and Mion's hawkish gaze peered at me once again.
じゃあね、ケイちゃん。
あ、
明日、学校休んじゃ嫌だよ。
The door closed. I wasn't able to move a muscle even after their low laughter died off in the distance and silence once again enveloped the room. Coming back to my senses, the first thing I did was lock the door. They knew what Oishi-san and I talked about? Why? How? No, that wasn't important. Thinking about it now, it could have been overheard from the beginning when Oishi-san met me. Well, it could have been. Just as Mion said, I couldn't hide anything. Then, what were they trying to tell me? That part was obvious. They were warning me not to say anything unnecessary. What did they deem unnecessary? I only talked with Oishi-san about one thing, and they were warning me that was unnecessary. What was it that Oishi-san talked to me about? The incidents involving Oyashiro-sama's curse that occurred every year weren't individual cases, but were connected as a whole, as well as the fact that there may be multiple perpetrators hidden within Hinamizawa. No, more precisely, that Mion, Rena, Satoko, and Rika-chan were all suspicious. Is that what they were warning me against?
何バカなこと考えてんだよ。俺。
I hit my own face hard enough to that it let out a loud slap. If only that would wake me from this nightmare, but for some reason it felt like I was punching a blanket. It was almost laughably painless. Calm down, Keiichi Maibata. When did I become such a pessimist? Calm down. Settle down and sort things out. The reason Mion knew I was eating lunch with Oishi-san was probably because somebody from Hinamizawa just happened to be there at the time. They must have told Mion that I was there. That made the most sense. Plus, come to think of it, she didn't ask me where I ate lunch, did she? She only asked, was it good? They were just curious since I was together with someone not from Hinamizawa. It's not as if they had any ulterior motives. That's it. That has to be it. Thinking about it that way, it was the same with Rena. I was just being strangely ambiguous about when I met Oishi-san, and Rena was just correcting me on that. That's when I was bewildered by the change in character from the usual mild-mannered Rena, and was startled by it. That's the most natural way of thinking about it. It felt like my mind was mixed up My mind was mixed up like a tangled mess of spaghetti. Deep red, the marinara sauce would have poured out of my nose and ears if you squeezed my head. Jesus. Thinking that, I suddenly felt like vomiting. I really didn't want that to happen, so I stopped holding my head. Lately, I had no idea what anyone was saying. Spending time with them was fun. It didn't feel like there was any sort of hidden agenda. I really do think they're a good bunch of people. When I just moved here and couldn't make heads or tails of everything, they were really kind to me. Rena was really kind and always looked after me. As long as that strange affliction didn't rear its ugly head, she was really pretty cute. Mion is also a really good person. She didn't care about anyone's age or gender and was optimistic and outgoing. I was never bored when I was with her. And talking of not getting bored, rambunctious Satoko was a good person for that too. She was pretty bratty, but that was just the way she interacted with others. Rika-chan was the same way. She didn't speak often, but that didn't mean she was always silent. They're my friends. But after hearing of the better untold secrets of Hinamizawa from Oishi-san and Tomitake-san, when I was told about Oyashiro-sama's curse, things started going crazy. Then, hearing from Oishi-san that Mion, Rena, Satoko, and Rika-chan were all suspicious. After that, everyone changed. That's right. It all started getting weird after Oishi-san told me all that strange stuff. At that time, I really should have just not listened to those weird stories. I shouldn't have even asked Tomitake-san about the past incidents on the night of the Wataganashi. If I just hadn't gotten that strange sense of curiosity. That's right. So that's why they fucked Tomitake-san. The impudent outsider speaking to the likes of me after everybody went out of their way to keep it a secret from me. They'll probably fuck Oishi-san as well, for trying to unearth what everybody was warning me was better left buried. Besides that, he was unforgivable for spewing words that made me doubt the others. Of course a guy like that is going to be fucked. Both Tomitake-san and Oishi-san were nothing but outsiders after all. They were entities who couldn't coexist with the people of Hinamizawa. Those guys should just fall into Yashiro-sama's curse and just die. It wasn't their fault. It was my fault for not being able to hold back my curiosity. It wasn't their fault. 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 I settled into a daze. It was a lethargic feeling like I had just gotten up, but the ominous chill that haunted me had subsided. I was fine now. I was no longer frightened. I'd completely recovered. I'll go to school tomorrow, right as rain. I'll greet everyone. I'll take part in club activities. It'll definitely be fun. It had to be fun. I was one of them after all.
そうだ。おはぎ食べないと。どれがレナの手作りか当てないといけないんだよな。
I remembered the homework the two brought with them when they had visited me. But wow, our club did delivery? That was something else. I picked up the package I dropped on the floor and headed into the living room. It would be nice, I guess, to have some tea with it. to fill my mouth with mochi while drinking tea. Oh, this is quite a delectable situation I was in. Opening up the newspaper wrapping, there were 5 plump red bean paste mochi fit snugly inside. There were letters written from left to right on the newspaper, A, B, C, and D, D and E. Now then, they said Rena made one of these. I wonder which one. There wasn't much difference in how they looked. They smelled and appeared about the same. This was a pretty difficult problem. The biggest difference was probably their shape. I wasn't sure what kind of person Mion's grandma was, but Rena's had to be different from hers. Looking carefully, I could only see one mochi that was made very neatly. So well that just by staring at it, one could tell it stood out.
この一個がレナのか否かが勝負の分かれ目みたいだな。
Calm down and think even harder. Mion had said her grandma made a ton of them, and was told to give some out if I remembered correctly. So that meant 4 of these were from that large batch. Then what about Rena? She probably only made 1. She probably spent quite a bit of time on it, meaning the one Rena made was this one, E. For a moment, I thought it may have been a trap Mion laid as she knew I'd pick up on it. But that probably wasn't the case. I wouldn't be so sure if I knew Mion had made it, but since she said Rena made it, it probably wasn't a trap.
よし、お茶も準備 OK。まずはディフェンディングチャンピオンのミオンのばあちゃんからだ。どれ？
Not bad. The smooth bean paste and soft, chewy texture still left little to be desired. The tea I drank afterward also accentuated the experience. This was an exquisite piece of work. Now, how about Rena's? The creation was so delicate, one would think it was a high-class Japanese dessert. Since I normally had quite the appetite, I was slightly worried about the size of the portion. Oh, well, first a bite. This was quite a difficult one to judge, actually. The ingredients were exactly the same, so there was little difference in flavor. What was different was how it shaped at the end, so it was to be expected. So the deciding factors would be presentation and volume. The well-formed and well-sized champion versus Rena the challenger with a size you just couldn't get enough of. I'd only had 1 bite of Rena's. I would probably have to wait until after I was done eating to make my decision. Maybe there was something hidden inside that could cause an upset. It seems my prediction was right. My tongue touched something. I didn't feel like something edible, so I reached in with my fingers and grabbed it. What? What was this? Before I could fully comprehend what it was, I threw away the rest of the mochi I was eating as fast as I could. It slammed against the wall, causing the bean jam to splatter. Then, after sticking for a moment, it slid down to the floor. I was dumbstruck by my own actions. What was I doing? Rena had gone out of her way to make it for me. How could I? Dumbstruck, I looked down at the hand that performed such a vile act. Then I remembered what I had taken out of my mouth. At first I thought it was a hair. Even though it was shorter than Mion's, Rena's hair was still quite long, and it wasn't this short. It was also a bit too hard to be hair. It was thick enough to roll around on my tongue. There was a bit of a metallic sheen on one end of it. Ah, yes, there was a hole for where the thread goes through. Like it was a sewing needle. Yes, that's right. It looked very much like a sewing needle. Exactly like one. The end was pointed as well, quite sharply. It really did look just like a sewing needle. Huh? What did I mean by looked very much like a sewing needle just a bit ago? I couldn't answer, but a voice inside me already knew, and let me know by chattering my molars together. I couldn't stave off the terror welling up inside me. Suddenly I tasted something metallic and felt a prickling pain at the back of my throat. I stuck my finger in the back of my mouth and felt around to see if it was bleeding. Suddenly I felt the urge to vomit. The sharp taste of bile irritated the back of my throat. I clasped both hands over my mouth, and after writhing in agony, I was somehow able to hold back the nausea. I was finally able to breathe normally again. But this time my heart was throbbing intensely. Then it finally registered. exactly what was mixed in with the mochi. Before I could think of the correct word, my hands were already on the move. Splat. Plop. Splort. I tossed the rest of the mochi against the wall. Fuck you, mochi. Oh, you look like turds. Then the geometrical patterns of the scattered bean jam on the wall suddenly invoked a terrible omen in my mind. After looking away, I dashed out to the hall and flew upstairs to my room, where I stayed under my covers until morning. I clutched my own shoulders, howling madly in a mix of fear, anger, sadness, and frustration. This wasn't a threat or a warning or reminder. Nothing as simple as that. What had happened in Hinamizawa? What is happening in Hinamizawa? What would happen? I didn't know the answers to any of those questions. Where did I break a taboo? Regardless, now Rena and Mion and others, they consider me an enemy. And they thought I should just die? I won't let you kill me. Not for such a pointless reason. I fell into a restless sleep as I was crushed by my negative emotions. It was as if I was being drawn into a billowing, bottomless marsh. Fuck that mochi, fuck that mochi, fuck that mochi, it tried to kill me. Rana knows iron is a key part of a balanced diet. The sound of muffled footsteps stomped in from the door to my room. A moment of silence as if whomever they belonged to was ascertaining if I was inside. Of all the things I should have been doing, I continued on with my restless slumber. I was very much conscious, but my body hadn't caught up yet. Even with danger bearing down on me from just beyond the door, it was as if I was completely paralyzed, unable to move. Without a doubt, this was sheer terror. Please, just leave. Hey, why isn't my body awake yet? If they came into my room right now, then... I sprung onto my feet and threw my covers at my mom, who was opening the door.
何ケイチどうしたの
ごめん、寝ぼけてた。
I thought it was still 1 or 2 a.m., but the morning sun was already streaming through the gap between the curtains. It felt nothing like morning. Yesterday I must have fallen asleep right after that. Then I should have gotten a full 10 hours of rest. But it didn't feel like that at all. My internal clock was completely screwed up and my sense of balance felt off. I felt feverish enough that it was clear to me that I was still not well.
どうケイチ体の調子はどう学校行けそう
I felt far from well enough. No, I wasn't even mentally fit to go. I was still plagued with the terror from yesterday. If I had swallowed that needle, what would have happened? Or what if it had pierced my tongue? There was undoubtedly a murderous intent, but I don't think that's all it was. If they really wanted to kill me, then there were other, more certain ways to do it. They wouldn't resort to such a dubious method as having me swallow a needle. Meaning, I didn't want to believe it, but going that far was just a threat from Rena and Mion. Aren't you glad you didn't die? But next time we'll use a more assured method. Like that. Something like sending a letter with a razor inside would have been a joke compared to this.
ちゃんと病院は行ったお薬は飲んだの
まあ一応。
Something about my mom's dubious gaze bothered me. She seemed more concerned about her son missing Tuesdays of school rather than him being sick. It was definitely mental fatigue. I wasn't really physically
一
ill.
度生活のリズムを崩すとなかなか戻らないんだからさあ起きて起きて病は気からって言うのよ
I'd heard that line many times before. I was given an award in elementary school for having perfect attendance, but it wasn't like I was healthier than everyone.
さあさあ顔洗ってらっしゃいご飯はもうできてるわよもうレナちゃんが来るまであんまり時間がないわよ
Mom's tone meant I couldn't argue about it, so I had to give up on skipping a second day.
そうそう今の壁にボタ餅を投げつけたのはケイチダメよあんなことしちゃお父さん怒ってたわよ
I didn't feel particularly guilty for doing it, so I didn't have much of a reaction. Also, Mom didn't question me any further about it. She headed downstairs after she was certain I was getting up. What Mion said yesterday, "I'd hate it if you missed school tomorrow," came back and dwelled in the back of my head. What did she mean by that? I didn't even have to really think about it. She was saying, "Don't be absent." Taking that a bit further, it was the same thing as her saying I should just go about living my life as if nothing happened. If I showed any signs of acting unusual, it would probably result in them making their move. If I acted differently, someone like Oishi-san, for example, might end up noticing that something is up. Meaning if I didn't watch my mouth or did anything differently from the norm. In effect, it would end up communicating something to those who were undesirable. And it seems that was something the girls didn't intend to forgive. So, if I just went along as normal, no harm would come to me. Was that how it was going to be? All that misery I experienced up until yesterday would, almost creepily, just fade away. It was an enticing deal. Just by forgetting everything I'd seen or heard these last few days, I'd be able to keep on living like normal.
そんな虫のいい話あるわけ？
I swallowed hard. I once again deliberated on the idea that I had just rejected. Mion was probably a good person who had her friends at heart. She was giving me, who had mistakenly broken some of their rule of theirs, a chance. Was what I did really something so unforgivable? But Mion had given me another chance. She was saying if I just forgot everything and kept on living like I had, I'd be forgiven.
ケイチ、ご飯冷めちゃうわよ。急いで降りてらっしゃい。早くしないとレナちゃんが来ちゃうわよ。
あ、今行くよ。
Well, I'm sure Doki Doki Literature Club was inspired in some part by stuff like Higurashi. This is much older. I crammed my textbooks in my bag and hastily made my way downstairs. There's a lot of amazing, creepy visual novels out there if you're interested. I picked up my somewhat bland breakfast. It seemed that I didn't have much time. It was already past when I usually met up with Reina. Given yesterday's events, she'd probably be here in the next 5 minutes. I needed to be ready to head to school by then. I had to forget everything that had happened the past 2 days. Forget it all and return to my normal life. For this to be normal, I'll have to be where I normally meet up with Reina. Today of all days, the rice was dry and hard to get down. I jumped at the sound and dropped my chopsticks. That chime signaled that Reina had arrived. Mom hurried me along.
レナちゃん来ちゃったわよ。急いで急いで。
My mother's merry smile and my gloomy face were polar opposites. Honestly, I was reluctant to see Reina, who was waiting there on the other side of the door. The Reina on the other side, was it the Reina I knew? I couldn't keep her waiting. I needed to do things as usual.
おはよ
An invigorating greeting filtered in from across the doorway.
う。ケイチ君、遅かったから来てみたけど、今日はどうかな？かな？
The manner in which Reina was concerned was without a doubt the Reina I knew. But that was probably only if I reciprocated. Forget everything from yesterday, pretend as though nothing had happened. Forget that gruesome dismemberment. Forget about the mysterious deaths that happened the following years. Forget about the people falling to their death, and the terminal illness and suicide, the fatal beatings and the disappearances. That's a lot of things. Forget all of it. Forget that Reina and Mion were scary. Of course, forget it all. Forget about all of it. Forget about the mochi, too. Forget. Reina once again asked to make sure.
学校行けそう？
あ、大丈夫だよ。
よかった。じゃあ行こう。みーちゃん待ってるよ。
Reina showed me her usual bright smile. I couldn't find any hint of deceit in her expression. My nervousness dissipated, giving way to relief.
なのにさとこちゃんね、絶対にできるって意地になっちゃって。
As we were walking, Reina talked about a lot of different stuff, more so than usual.
それで？
さとこちゃんブキッドだから何度やってもできないの。 可愛かったんだよ。
Everything Rena talked about was just silly nonsense, so I just replied every so often and laughed from time to time. It was a rather laid-back conversation. We passed by one of our neighbors and they called out to us.
あれケイチちゃんにレナちゃん。今日はちょっと遅いんじゃないの？ミオンちゃん、先に行くって言ってたわよ。
ああ、みーちゃん怒ってるかな。怒ってるかな。早く行こう、ケイチくん。
After greeting our neighbor with a smile, Rena turned back to me and poked her tongue out. Not expecting that, I couldn't help but crack a smile.
あ、ケイチくん笑った。
なんだよ。
Rena stopped and stared at me.
ケイチくん、今朝もなんか元気なかったから、まだ風邪が治らないのかなって思ってたけど、大丈夫みたいだね。だね。
With a grin, she gently poked my cheek. It was a bright, sincere smile. Hey, Keiichi Maibata. How can you still doubt Rena after she shows you a smile like that? Maybe I just had a high fever up until today, and I imagined everything that I thought happened because I was bedridden and delirious. I really hoped that was the case. If God would grant me just one wish, there's only one thing I'd wish for. I would want what had happened in the past few days. More specifically, from the night of the Watakanashi up until last night. I wanted all of that to have never happened. I wonder how many times I'd wished for these past few days. As long as Rena kept on smiling like this, I think it might just become reality. So I wanted Rena to keep on smiling. Keep on smiling.
で、ケイチくん。昨日のおはぎ、ちゃんと食べてくれた？
That vain wish of mine was instantly shattered. My heart began palpitating. The relaxed morning mood suddenly became frigid. Rena's smile was the same as usual. Her eyes were gentle as usual. Those mochi yesterday, did you eat them all? Of course, she wasn't asking the question at face value. In other words, Rena was asking, did you get the message? She was probably trying to convey that...
ケイチくん？
I was reluctant to give an answer. Rena stopped walking and stared deeply into my eyes. Don't hesitate, Keiichi Maibata. Rena was acting the same way as always, wasn't she? I needed to respond in my usual way. Naturally, of course. But both my throat and mouth had gone dry and my lips were stuck together. Hurry up and answer, Keiichi. Not that much time had passed. I could still keep the conversation going naturally. I had to say something quickly. Rena playfully mimicked what I said when I finally squeaked something out. Rena's reaction was still normal. It seems that there wasn't as long of a pause as I had thought. Somehow I finally squeaked out the rest. However, my strained efforts neither sullied nor brightened Rena's expression. For a moment I panicked, thinking I had replied incorrectly. But after a few moments, Rena broke into her usual soft smile and giggled with a joyful voice that seemed to echo through the morning air. Being strung along by that laugh, I couldn't help but laugh as well.
そうなんだ。で、全部食べたのかな？かな？
My timid smile froze again. Did you make it without swallowing the sewing needle? Was that what she was asking? If I had swallowed it, then I wouldn't be here.
いや、全部は食べきれなかったからさ、まだ残ってるんだよ。
I was scared out of my wits, but that's how I played it.
あれれ？どれがレナが作ったのか当てる宿題はどうなっちゃったのかな？
あの宿題って今日までだったっけ？
うん、今日までなんだよ。みーちゃん怒るよ。きっと罰ゲームだね。
We both laughed at each other again. To a casual observer, it was just a typical morning. If I could just let myself believe, then even I'd think it was just the usual morning routine. But I was certain I wasn't mistaken. There was something unimaginable buried beneath the facade of this giggling Rena.
嘘だ！
I recalled that unexpected piercing voice that I could hardly believe came from Rena's mouth. The moment that image crossed my mind, I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back. Was it only at that particular time that something evil had possessed Rena? No, that was wrong. That was still Rena. Oishi-san told me, didn't he?
実は調べてみたら、竜宮さんは引っ越しの少し前に学校で謹慎処分を受けているんですよ。なんでも学校中のガラスを割って回ったんだとか。
Rena had a disorder that normal people didn't. No matter how pleasantly she smiled, that fact would not change. But I couldn't even imagine how she looked as she broke all the glass throughout the school. One thing I knew is that it wasn't some spur of the moment. Something spur of the moment. If I had some sudden outburst of anger, if it was some sudden then maybe she'd break a pane or two. But she broke all of the windows throughout her school. Just imagine going through your own school breaking the windows with a bat. Swinging full force at each pane of glass, one after another, paying no heed to the flying shards. Your classmates aghast, unable to move from the sudden turn of events. I wonder where she could have found the most windows lined up in a row. Probably the hallway. F is something you would say to people who have died. It's like press F to say respects. It's kind of a meme. So they're assuming he's fucked.
Oh, that's what I thought it was.
Yes.
Okay.
It was difficult for me to connect that horrifying image with the Rena smiling at me right now. But I just had to imagine it. Impossible because it was unimaginable. That naive way of thinking no longer worked. The unpleasant piercing sound of shattered glass. The crunching noise as Rena treads across the broken shards, walking towards me. Rena's classmates going pale as they forget to even breathe. I wondered what they did as Rena came closer, breaking windows along her path. Did they earnestly try to bring her to her senses by saying something? Or did they jump at her, trying to stop her savagery? Or did they run to the staff room to call for the teachers? Probably none of those. In the face of that blood-curdling sight of Rena busting window after window, undoubtedly, all they could do was silently clear a path for her. Dumbfounded, just clearing the path for Rena to continue. It would be cruel to blame anyone for looking the other way. No, they weren't simply looking the other way. They knew it was the only way they could to protect themselves. If they had done something differently from the rest, they may have suddenly found themselves as Rena's new target. What would Rena have done to whoever attracted her attention? The answer was obvious. She would have undoubtedly acted according to her whims. Meaning I would be the next window. Rena staring into my eyes, shards of glass crunching and crackling underfoot as she drew closer. I was also drawn into her eyes, paralyzed. Then Rena struck me with the bat, over and over again, like I was one of those windows. I crouched down onto the floor, desperately protecting my head. Rena didn't care whether it was my head or my back. Zealously, she hits me again and again. What kind of expression was she making as she was doing this over and over again? I peered up to see. Her expression was so indifferent it was completely unnerving. It's because no matter how many times she struck me, I didn't make as pleasant a sound as the other windows. You just gotta hit harder. She struck me continuously, then the sound will be satisfied. Over and over again, the sound Rena wanted didn't come out. Our classmates standing around didn't try to stop her. They didn't want to be the next window. Somebody save me. Turning a blind eye unless we're hanging out. But of course, everyone in class scrambled to obtain the highest standardized test scores. They'd gain nothing from saving a cram school tryhard like me. Eventually, there would be a faint sound, similar to when you crack open a walnut, and some sort of reddish-black spray would shoot out. Anyway, it wasn't that Rena momentarily lost herself in her anger. After forcing myself to breathe and calming down my heart, I recalled what Oishi-san told me.
でですね、そのカウンセリングをした医師のカルテにレナさんの会話内容が記載されているんですがね、その中に出てくるんですよ。
Oh yeah, she says she was compelled by the curse. Or Oyashiro-sama talks
出て
to
く
her.
るんですよ。おやしろ様って単語が。
Following that, Reina was suspended and had regular examinations at the hospital. Then, as Reina was undergoing counseling, she said it over and over.
お
Oyashiro-sama.
やしろ様っていう幽霊みたいなものがですね、夜な夜な自宅にやってくるっていうんですよ。枕元に立って自分を見下ろすんだって。
That was only a piece of their conversation, so I still couldn't see the big picture. But it was by no means a happy little conversation. Then what Rena did, was she saying that ghastly incident was a result of her being possessed by Oyashiro-sama? Up until now, I didn't want to believe in Oyashiro-sama's curse. That's why I wanted to say the mysterious deaths every year happened because of some sort of conspiracy. Every time I talked with Oishi-san, I was more certain that the deaths were the work of men and not some curse. Except, if it was people perpetrating the incidents, my friends were somehow deeply connected. If I refused to believe that the curse was real, then I would have to believe that those who acted the kindest to me were deeply involved in the incidents. Why? How? For what reason? Was Rena? Was everybody? It was much more painful and troublesome than accepting that it was just Oyashiro-sama's curse. In the aftermath, Reina had admitted to her doctor that it was because she was possessed by Oyashiro-sama. I felt a strange sense of relief from that. So that's how it was. There wasn't a second side to Reina. She just did that because she was possessed by something strange like Oyashiro-sama. It wasn't Rena's fault. Oyashiro-sama was the one to blame. I knew. This was all backwards. Refusing to believe there was a curse, I wanted there to be a human perpetrator. Now that my close friends were the ones under suspicion, I changed my beliefs at my own convenience, saying it was Oyashiro-sama's curse to blame. Which was the better choice, accepting that Oyashiro-sama's curse exists, or that Rena and the rest of them were deeply involved in the string of mysterious deaths? I didn't want to think about it. If I just didn't think about it, I'd be able to continue the same as always. I wanted to believe that. But that was no longer possible. I had received their message. It was pathetic of me to try and bend the meaning to my own convenience. Regardless of whether my opponent were a human or a curse, I won't let it kill me. As if I would just bend over and give in. For no good reason at all.
圭一君、さっきから変な顔してる。なんでだろう。
Inhaling sharply upon hearing Rena's voice, I came back to my senses. Before I had realized it, we were already at the entrance. Shaking my head a few times, I exorcised all those terrifying thoughts. No matter how you looked at it, there's no way Rena could have done such terrible things. It was like I was trying to placate myself. As I slid the door open, a blackboard eraser loaded with chalk dropped down on my head the moment I stepped into the classroom. Oh, on your head. The chalk dust went into my eyes, inducing a brief moment of agony. He was putting himself in the position of a student who acted out and gave her shit, and what it would have been like to be her next window. So that was just him thinking to himself. That wasn't him actually getting beaten by a bat. That was just him imagining what it would be like. Not quite in the mood for it, I really didn't react to Satoko's trap. Satoko braced herself as I passed by, expecting me to attack her. She seemed a bit disappointed as I simply walked by silently. Satoko, you little gremlin. She is my least favorite character. I can understand her to an extent, but she's also, like, so irritating. Suddenly there was a slap down on my shoulder. It hurt a bit.
よ、ケイちゃん、しっかり休んできた？
It was Mion. My mind was full with the stuff about Rena, but Mion was also a party of interest. Remember, Keiichi, that hawkish gaze from yesterday.
ああ、おはよ
なんだなんだ。ずいぶんと覇気のない挨拶じゃん。
Yes, that was all in his head. He was like, he had heard the story about her breaking the windows, so he pictured it in his mind, and he's like, what would the other students do? And he's like, they wouldn't do jack shit, because they knew if they stood out or tried to stop her, they could be the next victim. So, he imagined doing that, and why no one would come to help him, and why, yeah. That was just his internal monologue.
差し入れのおはぎ、ちゃんと食べてくれなかったの？
I mean, she doesn't even have a bat right now. I'm like this because I ate them. Those words were itching to be blurted
う。
out.
やっぱ食欲がなくてさ、いくつかは食べたけど、だいぶ残しちゃったんだ。
あれ、じゃあ宿題は？どれがレナの手作りかってのの回答は？
Jakuzure isn't nearly that bad. She just has a bratty, rich girl attitude.
ケイ
Whereas
チ君宿題忘れなんだって。
frickin' Satoko, man. You gotta experience a bit more before you can truly understand. Just drop kick Satoko in her gremlin face. Jesus.
ありゃー。じゃあ仕方ないね。罰ゲーム。ひひひひひ。
Flashing a lurid smile, Mion returned to her seat. There was nothing from our exchanges that would cause our classmates to suspect anything was amiss. But of course, anyone listening to our conversations up until this morning wouldn't see anything suspicious. That was why it was so frightening. They acted in a way that, regardless of whatever happened to Keiichi Maibara, no one would ever suspect them. That fact had me terrified. Soon the teacher came. She asked how I felt and took attendance. Another dull, ordinary day began. I'm glad none of you are all given spoilers yet. That's good. We don't want the spoilers this time round. This free study period was a convenient time to consider where I stood. I gently closed my eyes and pondered the ridiculous position I was in right now. First of all, what I shouldn't forget was how dangerous of a situation I was in. I had fallen out of favor with them. After interacting with Oishi-san multiple times, I could see I was getting closer to the heart of the matter. The warning yesterday with the mochi was a good indicator of that. No, calling it a warning was just my habit of understanding things. It probably had no meaning beyond stunting my progress and buying themselves some time. Until they had a method of completely erasing me, they were just biding their time. Even though they were keeping me under their thumb with threats, it didn't change the fact that I knew too much. The chilling sensation of my desk made me recall Satoshi Hojo, the boy who was using the seat until last year when he disappeared. He was also similar to me? Did he learn something he shouldn't have and was erased? Damn. I wouldn't let them get rid of me so easily. Never. But, were they really trying to kill me? I've had these contradictory feelings for a while now. Even though I suspected them, I felt I had to cover for them. Even having witnessed all of their suspicious behavior, a morning like this just made it all seem like an elaborate hoax. No, that's just what I want to believe. Doubting my friends? Covering for them? My life was in danger. Or was it? Actually, I was debating the wrong point. Given my current situation, those points were something that should have been deliberated on a long time ago. But really, Rena and the rest of them, were they actually aiming to kill me? The little voice inside me continued to torment me with these unresolvable trains of thought. Are you an idiot, Keiichi Maibara? The answer should be obvious. But maybe that sewing needle might have just been an accident, right? Could you screw up and drop a sewing needle into a piece of mochi? the benefit of the doubt can only go so far. Both Rena and Mion had acted and behaved suspiciously, but maybe it was all just some sort of misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? It wasn't just suspicious, it was outright ludicrous, right? Rena just corrected me for lying, and Mion only asked me about what I had for lunch. Rena was standing outside my door eavesdropping for a solid hour? She was probably just waiting for my phone call to end. For a whole hour outside your room? And is this normal to go home afterwards without saying anything? You heard from Oishi-san, didn't you? About what Rena did at her former school? But at the hospital, she said it was Oyashiro-sama's fault.
いい加減にしろよ、前原圭一。お前、命を狙われてるって自覚あるのかよ。
I inadvertently blurted those words out loud. Hearing myself say so directly left me dumbfounded for a few moments. Afterwards, I had to look around to check if anyone else had heard it. My little soliloquy cut a little too close to the truth. Even though I could feel the murderous intent from Rena and the others, part of me somewhere was still trying to deny that. This late in the game, such hesitation could be fatal. I knew that. But I was just your average student, a man living his normal, ordinary life. Do you think I could suddenly believe that my friends, who I'd been happily laughing together with up until last Sunday, now intended to kill me? Right? This time I remembered to keep my voice down so only I could hear it. There was only one thing I now understood. I was too soft. I didn't completely understand how dangerous Rana and the rest of them were. No, I wasn't trying to understand. I was too soft for not listening to Oishi-san when he was earnestly showing me the heart of the matter. I didn't listen because I was too busy pretending to be dejected. I didn't comprehend it. I was just running away. I didn't comprehend it, so nobody had any notion to try and kill me. I needed to get rid of such naive thoughts. As I made that resolution, I heard the bell signaling the end of class. So soon. The day was already over. I didn't recall eating lunch or doing anything in class. My friends were putting their desks together in preparation for club activities. Not long ago, I would have probably happily jumped into that circle. The way Satoko spoke was so typical and familiar. It almost physically hurt. Seeing Rena's expression, which she said was really looking forward to today, was hard to take. Hey, Keiichi, maybe Oishi-san is just some enormous jerk trying to separate me from the others by lying to me? Trying to expunge such weak-minded thinking, I slapped myself in the face. Yeah, was Rena really trying to kill me? I wish someone would tell me it was a hoax. I didn't care if it actually was one or not, I just wanted someone to say it was. Yet another weak-willed thought. How did I ever become this naive? Apparently, that was how my inner dilemma appeared to Rena. I can't spoil what the scariest death in the game is. We haven't even reached, we've heard of people dying, but we haven't gotten to, the resolution of any of these plot routes yet. Upon hearing that I wasn't going to participate in the club meeting, Mion pouted unhappily. I wouldn't fall for some dumb taunt. Without even a real retort, I just grabbed my bag and was about to get up. Someone's hand perched itself gently on my head. It was Rika-chan. She was stretched up as far as she could, doing her best to pat my head with her petite hand. It felt so nice, which made things even harder. That's all I said as quickly as I left the classroom. Or as I quickly left the classroom. They said something to me as I was leaving, but I couldn't make it out. I managed to make it all the way to the entrance in that state of mind, took out my shoes, put them on, and went forward. Forward. Harden that heart, Keiichi Maibara. They were, for some unfathomable reason, trying to kill me. They were plotting something dubious, watching my every move. But I couldn't hate them. Because weren't they my friends? Part of me lamented my naivete, while another part lamented the fact that I had lost something important by lamenting over it in the first place. It felt like my personality was being ripped in two along with my body. If this is what Oyashiro-sama's curse was like, then it was just too harsh. Hey, Oyashiro-sama, I was wrong for not believing in your curse, but I believed in it now, completely. Your curse does exist, so seriously, give me a break. I beg of you, come on. Dinner was unusually bland. It had no flavor or aroma. The miso soup that normally tantalized my appetite instead tasted like nothing but boiled water. Dad was eating with us that night. It was a rare occurrence in this household. When he got into his work, he ate and slept on his own schedule. My dad never cared about the time. Since my dad was at the dinner table, it meant he had just reached a good point to take a break, or he was just in a slump.
とにかく作家のモチベーションってものを理解してないんだよ彼は。
タイアップの話だって口
His
約
dad's an
束なんでしょ
artist.
そんなに反りが合わないならきっぱりお断りしたら。
助け合いの世界だからお互い様だとは思うんだけど、これじゃ仕事にな。
I wasn't able to pick out much of my mom and my dad's conversation, but I could tell it wasn't a very pleasant topic. That, of course, made the disgusting food even less appealing. Staring listlessly at the exchange between my parents, my mind wandered off to the same thought processes I had going all day long. Friends close to me. No, they used to be friends. But I could no longer trust them. Right now I was greatly lacking in allies. People I trusted. People I could depend on when push came to shove. They were something I just didn't have. Having just one ally would have been incredibly reassuring in the currently hopeless situation I was in. I put down my chopsticks and looked over at my parents, who were still talking about work. The first course of action that came to mind was to tell my parents everything. Currently, there wasn't a single person from Hinamizawa I could trust 100%. That meant the only people I could trust were my parents. But if I told them everything that happened up until now, would they understand? Rena, for example. That neighborly Rena, who was so diligent in looking after me, came to get me every day and sometimes brought over a share of what she made. How could I explain that she wanted to kill me? No matter how I explained it, it would probably be difficult for anyone to comprehend. My somewhat eccentric dad wouldn't understand, and my high-strung mom would probably drag me off to a psychiatrist in the blink of an eye. Sadly, that was the amount of trust that existed in our relationship. Even if they did come to understand, what could they possibly do? Unless they could uncover the truth, they wouldn't be able to protect me. No. By informing them of these unnecessary things, I'd be putting my parents in danger as well. Considering that the victims in past incidents were often married couples, I couldn't even joke about it. For the entire Maibara family to have an accident or just to vanish into thin air, it was easily possible in Hinamizawa. What was important here was that knowing something unnecessary put you in danger. The most unsettling question was, how did they know that I knew? As long as they didn't know, my parents might not fall victim. That was one way to think about it, I guess. At least it was like that in my case. After I found out, things started becoming odd. In other words, it meant the following. As long as my parents didn't know anything, nothing would happen to them. Which means that this house would be a safe haven as long as my parents were in. I knew these were just assumptions based on conjecture on top of conjecture. Wanting this house to be a safe haven, that was the pinnacle of my weak-willed method of thinking. I had to concede that it was not completely safe. It was only safer than the outside. I knew that I couldn't rely on my parents. No, I couldn't risk getting my parents involved. Then the only person who could be my ally would be Oishi-san. Him and him alone. He was the only person who understood the situation I was in. He didn't care so much about my safety, but he was, without a doubt, passionate about solving this case. It was a bit frustrating. Oishi-san was basically the whole reason I was in this mess. Now to get out of it, I had to rely on him. Meaning it was all going according to his devices. It was just my job to look appetizing while bobbing in the waves as bait. Then, when the fish started gathering around, Oishi-san would pull up the big haul. It was slightly infuriating, but even I thought that was the best course of action. So then what should I do? Patience was the first rule of fishing. Just keep waiting until the fish actually bites. But I wasn't simply bait. There were lots of ways for me to struggle before being devoured. When they struck, I needed to somehow dodge just enough to tag out to Oishi-san. No question, it was gonna be hard. The timing to bring Oishi-san in would be difficult. He was in the city, not Hinamizawa, so if I phoned him in any moment of need, it would take him about 30 minutes to reach me. So I needed to run away for those 30 minutes. For example, if we set up a rendezvous point for dire situations or something. I'd just have to hide out there until Oishi-san arrived.
よし、少し見えてきたぞ。
I was still being chased around in the dark by boogeymen. But now I knew which way to go. I would have never imagined this would be so reassuring. The reason I'm not responding to conjecture about the plot is because it's good for you guys to have your conjectures. I don't want to validate or invalidate any of them, for the record. Oh yeah, it would probably be best if I had a concealed weapon for when things got rough. Typically, that would call for a switchblade. But that wasn't too reassuring for combat. Also, since it was recognized as a weapon by the public, that also wasn't good. Really, when the time comes, a long weapon like a bat would work in my favor. I remembered there was a metal bat at school. I could be confident with that when push came to shove. If I pretended I was practicing my swing, then it wouldn't be suspicious for me to always carry it around. I could go to school early tomorrow and secure it. Just possessing a weapon may be enough to deter them. Also, one more thing. Insurance. It could be something like a note or memo. I could write down everything that's happened as a sort of journal. In case I suddenly vanished, the journal would be left behind. With my journal in his possession, Oishi-san should be able to avenge my death. I left my parents engrossed in their conversation about work and went back to my room. Can you validate parking? That would be nice. I tore out a piece of paper from a notebook and made my way to my desk. Last time I wrote a journal was for summer homework in elementary school. In the off chance something bad happened, the police could use my diary as a lead. So I should only write down the facts. How should I start? I jotted down my thoughts as they came. I, Keiichi Maibara, am in fear for my life. It made me laugh nervously. It was a line that showed up often in detective stories. I never even dreamed that I would be in the type of situation where I'd write it myself. I do not know why they are after my life. Rin and the others were suspicious, but I had no proof, and that's why I couldn't write anything more. I laughed wryly at myself for writing such a passage draped in mystery. Would the police be able to get the hint from reading this enigmatic passage? I could only pray that they would. What I prayed for the most, though, was that this journal never needed to play its part. Here, I laughed nervously. It was too simple, so I wrote down one more line I just thought of. The only thing I do know is that it has something to do with Oyashiro-sama's curse. Was that too much? I probably shouldn't write more than that. If I wrote any more, then it would seem like I was just delusional. In order to appear to the reader that the person who had written this was of sound mind, I chose not to write anything else at that point. I just needed to add more as I learned more about the truth. I folded the paper and thought about a place to hide it. By hiding it somewhere obvious, there was a chance that they would uncover it instead. On the other hand, if I was too obscure enough a location... excuse me. Gotta reset. If it was in too obscure of a location, then there was the risk of nobody finding it at all. In the end, I decided to take the clock off my wall and stick my folded note on the back of it with Scotch tape. After that, I put the clock back in its normal position. Yeah, it didn't look like anything was hidden behind it. Now I just need to set it up such that, if anything happens to me, my parents could find it. I looked at it from countless different angles until I was satisfied and I made my way downstairs. My parents were still talking about work. It didn't look like it was going to end anytime soon, so I cut in.
話中ごめん。ちょっと聞いてもらっていいかな。
I'd never started off a conversation like that before, so my parents were both startled. They stopped talking and turned towards me.
どうしたのケイイチ？
お願いがあるんだけど、聞いてほしいんだ。もしもだよ。
圭一、急ぎの話じゃなきゃ後にしなさい。お父さんとお母さんはちょっと今、急ぎの話をしてるんだ。
I didn't think their talk was more urgent than mine. In any case, I stated my request.
もしもだよ。俺が死んだらさ。
Both of my parents' eyes went as wide as saucers.
死んだらさ、俺の部屋にある時計、あれを棺に入れてほしいんだ。
If they did that, then they'd probably find it. My memoir. Both my parents remained wide-eyed, not moving an inch. I couldn't blame
あの
them.
時計、工作の授業で作ったお気に入り
I
なんだ。
really like this fucking clock, man. Really love my clock, bro. It's so precious.
頼むよ。
どうしたのケイイチ？何かあったの？
Mom was finally able to ask me with a questioning gaze. Of course, this was a normal response for when someone suddenly talked about a subject like this. I felt bad about making them worry, but right now I just wanted them to think about the clock in my room. With the awkward mood leaving the room in silence, I decided to go back to my room.
俺さ、明日は早くに学校に行きたいから、もう寝るよ。おやすみ。
Saying only that, I left the living room. You're acting mighty strange, boy. I needed to get to school early tomorrow and secure that bat. I should make today the last day I went to school with Rana. As I climbed the stairs, I heard my mom call my name, but I pretended not to hear her. It wasn't something I could talk about with my parents. If I talked about it, it would only make things more dangerous. The fight that had begun was mine and mine alone. I couldn't rely on anybody. I wouldn't be killed. Not when I still knew nothing. $1 billion. They're talking about if they just bribed Keiichi instead of trying to threaten him. How much money you would ask if they were going to do that. Alrighty, I think we're going to wrap that up for today. How did we do? How are we doing? 34 concurrent viewers. That's okay. Nice. Thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, definitely subscribe to OtakuDaiKun. I believe I will be... I was talking about doing something else next weekend, but no, I definitely plan to stream probably Sunday again, so 1 week from now. Oh, sorry, I was just reading your chat. And, yeah, if you haven't yet, definitely check out my video on the Fate memes. And I believe, and I can't say this for sure, but I think the next part I read of this will be the last part of Chapter 1, the Onikakushi hen. That should be cool. And what do we got for next week? I've got a video talking about what I would consider to be the strongest mages in Fate, so I hope you enjoy that. And, another video on Tuesday. I always leave that to be a bit of a mystery unless it's something quite topical. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, celebrate your fandom.